speaker, Professor Ganti S. Murthy ji. Professor Murthy serves as the National Coordinator, Indian Knowledge Systems Division, Ministry of Education, and is a faculty at IIT Indore. His work lies at the vital interface of science, technology, and Sanatan Dharma, with a focus on bringing IKS frameworks into contemporary research and education. His talk today is titled Beyond Mathematical Realism, a Yog Vashishta Critique of Conscious Agent Modeling. At a time when AI and cognitive science model consciousness through mathematical agents, the Yoga Vasishtha, a profound text of Advaita Vedanta, questions the very premise of objectivity, placing consciousness as the ground of all reality. Professor Murthy bridges these worlds. He asks, can mathematics truly capture the conscious agent, or does the seer remain beyond all models? Please join me in welcoming Professor Ganti Murthy ji.
So it doesn't change? Okay. Excellent. Okay. Matrubhyo namah, pitrubhyo namah, gurubhyo namah, sabhayi namah, sabhapatitvischa namo namah. वागर्धावेव संपृक्तो वागर्ध प्रतिपत्तये जगतः पितरो वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरो वेदादौ यः स्वरः प्रोक्तो वेदान्ते च प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य यः परः स महेश्वरः. Sabhaye Namah. Warm greetings and namaskar to all of you. It's indeed my pleasure, and I would say it's my ignorant, bold stance that I'm taking here today before all such learned people, talking about something as deep as Yoga Vashishta and some of the latest things in the consciousness studies. I'll make an attempt, and as a beginner. Basically, we have been discussing a lot about the consciousness, mind, brain, their interactions, the scientific technologies that are being deployed to understand the nature of consciousness, realism, all of these things. So I want to talk about the efforts that people are making to model the realism and the consciousness using mathematical constructs. And then one of the pioneers in that area is Donald Hoffman. I'm primarily going to focus on his work, where he talks about modeling the consciousness through agents and agent-based modeling, and then comparing it to the Yoga Vashishta, which is one of the biggest profound works of Advaita Vedanta that Indian tradition has produced. And before I delve into all of that, I just want to get some terminologies on this thing, that if we look into basically the tetrad of how do we look at this mind, brain, consciousness from a Western perspective. It is mind, brain, intellect, and then consciousness. And whereas in the Bharatiya perspective, we talk about manaha, buddhi, ahankara, chitta. And there are definitions for all of these. Brain is the physical one, mind is that more of that processing part, intellect is decision making, and consciousness is the substratum kind of a thing that we all look at in the Western perspective. Whereas in the Bharatiya perspective, when we talk about manaha, basically sankalpa vikalpatmika manaha. This is what the Tattva Bodha says. Sankalpa vikalpatmika. Kind of oscillates between two decisions. Yes or no. To do or not to do, kind of a thing. And then the one that says do this or not do this is the buddhi. Nischayatmika buddhi. Ahankara, the one, that attribute of doer, that says, I am the doer who is doing this, is that ahankara. And then the chitta is the substratum on which all of these things play. So again, the debate has always been, does the consciousness arise from the matter or vice versa? So again, there is a huge difference in the perspective of the Bharati view and in the scientific view today, which talks about consciousness as an emergent property, dominant scientific view I would say. And then the Bharati view says consciousness is the substratum from which everything, including the material world, has evolved. This is primarily the difference. And you see this echoed many, many places. Mano buddhyankara chittani naham, nacha shrotra jihme, nacha ghanas netre, nacha vyoma bhumi, tejo, na tejo na vayur, chidananda rupa, shivoham is the, it says, begins the Nirvana Shatakam of Shankaracharya. And Maharshi Ramana also says the same thing in Upadeshasara. He says, Ahamayam kuto bhavati chinvata aipadatyaham nijavicharanam. Look for where is that I-ness coming from. And when you look at it, if you investigate that, bhavati chinvata aipadatyaham, that I naturally goes down when we do the nijavicharanam, when we do that self-inquiry. And this also places a big difference between what we talk about as a scientific methodology today and the differences between the Indian way of doing things, Bharatiya way of doing things. And when we look at the science that we do today, primarily it is based on the third person inquiry, objective methodologies, and some part of second person inquiry, basically, which is all our peer reviewed literature, that is based on these kind of third person inquiries. And science today does not admit the first person inquiries to a large extent. 99.99% science does not admit it. Maybe some fringes of consciousness research, there they may be doing it, but nowhere else. Even there is an attempt to connect it to the back to the third person inquiry. So, whereas the Bharatiya perspectives, the first person inquiry, which Richaji, I'm honored to have her as the chairperson, was pioneering that research, where that Swanubhava or Aparokshanubhuti, as we call it in the tradition, is the primary source of truth, and that is where everything comes from. And then that first person inquiry is placed at the topmost thing, and then the objective third person inquiry and second person inquiry. All of these things are part of valid means of jnana, which is the pramanas. They are all part of that. They are acceptable. Now, in Professor Behra was referring to this Nobel Prize in 2022, where the non-locality was established in that, and Nobel Prize was given for them. Because what that showed really was that physicalism approach is at its limits. It is breaking at its seams now. What did that basically Nobel Prize, what was that given for? That work was given for showing that there is local realism doesn't exist really. But what is local realism? Basically local realism is the notion that when you have any physical properties, they will have, the particles or objects will have definite physical properties whether you observe or not. So the point is about the observer. Observation is being done or not, and that is essentially what has been shown to be false. That means now this non-locality comes into picture. Now that also has led to the collapse of the space-time, because that becomes a perceptual construct now. Now this is where we are in big trouble, because formal mathematics cannot capture this non-dual substrate which we are talking about, because we are talking about the entanglement of the observer and the observed. The drashta and the drushyam are basically the entangled forever. That is what the Bharatiya view is. This is what the experiments have proven. Now this basically brings into the necessities of the consciousness first kind of ontologies, where the substratum of, where the drushya and drushyam, drashta cannot be separated. This is the challenge that we have now. And now how is it that we as humanity are addressing it? Today, if you look into many of the scientific theories, there are many ways in which the consciousness is being brought into the scientific world. And I want to talk about the Yoga Vasishtha perspective, which is probably, I don't know, I don't want even to date it, because it is Rama Vasishtha Samvada, and we don't really know when, there are dates, but I don't want to get into that. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is what is this Yoga Vasishtha consisting of. It has 6 prakaranas or 6 chapters. The very first one talks about the Vairagya. Then there is the Mokshu. prakarana, then this utpatti, sthiti prakarana, upashama and nirvana prakarana. These are the 6 prakaranas. Today's my talk will be focusing primarily on the utpatti and sthiti prakaranas. These are the 2 prakaranas where we are talking about the world, illusion, how is this world coming about, how are our experiences basically being created. And the core, ontological core of ontology of the Yoga Vasishtha is that Drishti Srishti Vada. What we are all familiar with is this Srishti Drishti Vada. What that means is, what is created out there is what we see. So there is a table there, there is a chair there, you are all sitting there, I am seeing you, you are created, and I am seeing you. So there is a Srishti that has happened and a Drishti that is happening. What Yoga Vasishtha posits is that it is not that, but it is the reverse. Drishti Srishti Vada. The Drishta, the seer is the core, and then everything else is the projection. That is the core philosophical stance of Yoga Vasishtha. And there is a concept of something called as a Dirgha Swapna. Dirgha Swapna means, the Swapna is a dream. But then a Dirgha Swapna, imagine not waking up from a dream. What does that state look like? Because in a dream, everything that we see, we are actually having, seems to be real in that state. In fact, Yoga Vasishtha makes this point. He says that if you look into the Jagrat, that is when we are awakened, in this, the Swapna seems to be unreal. That state of when we are in the sleep and when we are dreaming, the dreaming state seems to be unreal for us right now, because we know that. But what does it seem to us when we are in the dream state? Jagrat, this wakefulness state seems to be unreal. We don't even know about this state. So there is that. So what seems to be unreal in one or the other states and is not permanently real cannot be real. That is essentially the whole point that Yoga Vasishtha makes. And then therefore it says, this is not hard, this is a Dirgha Swapna. So it is like a long dream of that one seer, unchanging seer. And that is the stabilized dream state rather than a hard physical reality, is what the Dirgha Swapna concept and the Drishti Srishti Vada are talking about. So essentially it talks about the Chitta Matra, or the mind-dependent universe, going back from the consciousness to the material world. Now, how do they explain this? There is a beautiful analogy that is given here. And again here, I must, when I am at 5 minutes before I conclude, please let me know, so that I request you for that. So, Yoga Vasishtha also goes into something about using examples in extreme detail. It is, I think, in the 2nd Prakarana. I was wondering, why is it that Vasishtha is talking so much about using similes? He says, if I am saying A is similar to B, and there is 30 pages of discussion on that. He says A is similar to B means A has some characteristics that are similar to B. That also implies A has some characteristics that are different from B. If all the characteristics of A are similar to B, then I don't need to say A is similar to B. I would say that A is equal to A. Right? It's a very simple point that we understand. But it's a very, very important thing, because the examples that we can give when we talk about in the consciousness studies are from a physical world. So when we talk about examples, we have to look for the similarities in the characteristics that we are talking about and not dwell on the differences between this thing. So if I'm giving the example of an ocean wave, this does not mean that ocean is a Paramatma or ocean is the thing that I'm going to describe. It has similar characteristics that I'm trying to illustrate. So just that point. So that Dirgha Swapna here, the Yoga Vasishtha gives the example as some kind of a wave in an ocean. He says, wave, as the wave comes, there is a big wave you can see. And then that big wave is breaking into multiple smaller waves, and ultimately it is coming into droplets and then merging back. This, he says, is entire Srishti. The ocean represents the unchanging Paramatma, Parabrahma Swarupa, and from which a first thought arose. And that, as Shankaracharya says in the Saundarya Lahari, that spandana occurs. Shivashakya yukto yadi bhavati shakta prabhavitum nachedevam devo nakhalu spanditum api. That Shiva and Shakti are in that one state, and from that there is a stirring that happens within that consciousness, eternally. And from that, there is a thought that comes. And Veda also talks about it. May I become many. And that is that first wave. That is that wave of the Narayana. From the waters, it is rising. And from that comes another wave. Let me create, that is the Brahma. And from that, there are all these srishti that come, and essentially these are all smaller and smaller and smaller waves. So if we have a drushti of the wave, we see multiple waves, we see multiple droplets and multiple creations. Essentially, this is the multiple universes that are simultaneously happening, all in that Parameshvara. But if we have the drushti of the jala or the water, we only see water there. And that is the drushti of the Paramatma, that Jivan Mukta's drushti. So this is essentially the core of what Yoga Vasishta is talking about. Now coming to what Donald Hoffman talks about, he proposes two theories, interconnected but essentially the point. And he brilliantly proves all of these things to be true. There is first theory that he talks about is interface theory of perception. What he is saying is, you see, if you see this thing there, just look at those words on that this thing or on your screen. If you have a file or a folder, there is a folder icon. Does that icon represent the actual folder? No, the folder actually is in terms of bits, zeros and ones stored somewhere in the hard disk. But it is very difficult for us to interact with that. Therefore, there is an icon on the screen where I can take the file, move it to recycle bin. What is happening? I'm deleting it. But am I deleting the real file there, or am I just moving the icon here? My whole thing is I'm playing with the icons. So what Donald Hoffman makes is our mind is also this entire thing that we see outside is an perception interface. These are all icons. Just like you have icons on your computer, we have basically this entire structure where we are, all these things that we see are three icons. And he makes some brilliant examples, and he shows how this can be used in advertisement also, from the consciousness studies to selling things. There cannot be more this thing, but he does that. He shows that. So he says this is like a multimodal user interface. And this basically is, the icons are useful for a function to help us operate easily. So he says similarly the perception, the interface theory of perception says that our perception is designed to be useful for us. Useful for what? Basically it is like a data formatting language, useful for basically this survival essentially. So he says again that just like you have icon that is hiding the reality of what is the behind that CPU, codes, hardware and everything. Similarly, the physical objects like a rock, tree, chair is hiding. These are also icons hiding the nature of true reality. One thing that he shows experimentally is that he says, you think you are seeing the entire picture. Maybe you are all thinking that you are seeing this entire screen, me, all of this at the same time. But do you know that our eyes can only focus on a very, very small part that is about 40 pixels wide. 40 pixels. That's a tiny thing. It's not even like looking through a straw. There's something even smaller than that. That is what maybe through an eye of a needle or something. And then we are reconstructing everything. But for us, it doesn't seem that we are reconstructing. So this is the physical thing that has been measured. And he shows these experiments. So this interface theory of perception is not something that is out of the thing. It's actually been measured and then shown. And now that basically what does that imply? That implies that essentially the reality that we are perceiving is constructed mostly. Because a 40 pixel thing in some 6 million pixel frame is nothing really. And then he talks about why did it come about? He says, why is it that our senses are hiding this truth? Because it is a evolutionary game theory, and he gives a evolutionary game theoretic proof and says it is an evolutionary necessity. There are some beautiful simulations that he did, Monte Carlo simulations of two types of organisms. One that privileges truth of what I'm looking at versus one that looks at the fitness of survival. Can I survive or not in the wild? So for me, if I'm an animal in the wild, forest, for me, a snake that is moving there, that is more important for me to concentrate than getting the color of that some tree leaf right. For me, this is more important for my survival, for gathering food, for every function of life itself. So he says, because of that, the evolution quickly will remove those organisms which are basically looking only at the complete truth of the perception. So basically that is essentially what is coming up. Now, both of them, they show that the space-time that we are talking about is a temporary data structure, is what Hoffman says. And what Vasishtha says is this is merely a ripple, like a vikalpas, ripples of awareness, that's all, in the unmoving ocean of awareness. That's what this space-time is the Vasishtha's position. Now, both of them are saying space-time is not true. But then there is, how do we go from there? How do we get to the consciousness is where they differ. Hoffman talks about a network of algorithmic agents. What are these agents? He says, any conscious agent would have three things that it will do. It's called a PDA model. It is first is to perceive. It perceives the world, then experiences the world, and then based on that decides and actions, and then acts. And then acts will change the world again. And then so that there is a PDA loop. That is essentially for an individual agent, isolated agent. But now he says the consciousness is nothing but a network of interacting discrete units of agents. So he says it's like, so this one that you see there, this that you see on that left is a solo agent. The other picture that you see here on to your right is a picture where they have two interacting agents. So you have experiences, actions of one agent, experiences and actions of the second agent. And that essentially for this first agent in the bottom, the experiences and actions, the top one represents the world. For the top one, the bottom one represents the world. And this is how the world is created. What do you place in the world is this. Now you have a network of such agents and they're all doing that. Essentially, that's how the world reality is created, is what basically Hoffman proposes. Then he says, and there is, basically this is the mathematics of it. He says, for definitions of conscious agent is a 7-tuple X, basically which is your that whole universe of perception. G is your whole universe of decisions. W is the whole universe of actions, world. And then P is the perception, D is the decision, and A is the action. These are all Markovian kernels, yes or no, small sets. And then the T is a totally ordered set of all of these things. That's essentially what the mathematical formulation of this thing is. And on top of it, you put the interface theory of perception, and then fitness beats truth. Then you essentially get kind of a consciousness is what basically the Hoffman's alternative is. But then there is a flaw, I think. I don't know. I mean, that's why I said I'm very bold to say this. Because what Hoffman does is there is an epistemological leap from physical reductionism, basically it says, to mathematical reductionism. He says, of course, this physical world is not true, but then he goes on and then says these agents are true in a mathematical way. Because the numbers, sets of those equations themselves are cognitive features. Because they are actually part of the drishya itself. How can they be mapping something that is beyond that? So essentially what this theory is doing is it is replacing a material icon with a mathematical icon. But now there is one big problem that arises in this case. One is if there are separate conscious agents, so if we assume that all of us are separate, independent conscious agents, each of us having a different worldview, how is it that all of us are seeing the same screen? How is it that all of us are seeing the same speaker? How is that there is guaranteed this thing, coherence that is observed across agents? When you look at the mathematical probability of it, statistically it is almost impossible to do that. There is no mathematical guarantee either. Because if it is entirely localized and agent dependent, but spread across, then the shared reality that we experience becomes an anomaly. And so that's basically, this is the, you can say this is as a threat of intersubjective solipsism, that I see the world, there is nothing beyond what I am perceiving, but that is not our experience. So this is where the Yoga Vasishtha talks about samasrishti and adhisthanam, basically as a unified field of projection. Because that consistency flaw, you can resolve it using Yoga Vasishtha, because that wave that we saw was one wave on which there were many, many other smaller waves. Because of that, there is a consistency across the big wave, small wave to smaller wave to the droplets. And that entire thing is shared. So the properties, for example, in Utpatti Prakaranam, I think, Vashishta says, see, the idea of the Pancha Mahabhutas that we have was, and the time, was conceptualized, kalpita, it was imagined by the Brahma. And therefore, those are like rules that we have in a board game. If I have to give a daily example analogy, it is like chess. You see, in chess, we are playing. We are agreeing to some rules and playing it. Let's say, let's take away chess. Let's say squash, because you play alone. So there, you are playing alone, you are hitting the ball towards a wall. But then there, you are actually binding yourself to some kind of a rules. Who said you couldn't give infinite number of points to you? You are saying. Who is binding yourself to the rules? You are binding yourself. Similarly, Brahma says, this is how I am going to visualize. Then entire things that follow after the thoughts that follow after that initial Brahma's thoughts have to respect the initial thought. That is how there is uniform singular cosmic framework. And this is where that all individual minds are localized waves. Essentially that samasrishti with a adhishtanam, the same basis for everything. And that is essentially the non-dual Advaitic resolution of that kind of a conundrum that we face. And this also, another thing that comes, because Hoffman is talking about the biological fitness, whereas basically our Vashishta talks about vasanas. In fact, in entire tradition of Bharatas, we have the tradition of vasanas. What is this? Essentially, we are saying that driving force of reality is mere biological survival or karmic expression. This is the difference there. And basically, Hoffman is saying your headset is optimized for reproductive fitness, whereas Vashishta says it is an interface projected by the vasanas. And in fact, he says, addressing Rama, vasana navam Rama moksha ityate budhaihi padartha vasana dardhyam bandha ityabhidhiyate. When you have the padartha and vasana dardhyam, the solidity of that, firmness of that, vasanas and then the objects, that is essentially called the bandha. When you exhaust it, essentially it is called the moksha. And then, if you think about it, this is the kind of things I would suggest. One is a wave, a wave in an ocean. And then the second thing that we talk about is that the drashta and the drishyam are not separate. The seer and the seen cannot be separated. That is a beautiful metaphor for that in the form of Nataraja. The dancing form of Nataraja shows us that the dance cannot be separated from the dancer. The music cannot be separated from the musician. Similarly, the creation cannot be separated from the creator or the Chat Parabrahma. Both of them are interacting. So simultaneously pervades but is aloof. So you can see the dance has to have, for the dance to exist, you need to have a dancer. But you don't need the existence of dance for the existence of dancer. Again, another example. So this is essentially how this mechanics of illusion, this is something called Vivartavada, that is also there, essentially apparent manifestation. How does it manifest? Two common examples that are given are a snake. Let's say I throw a rope there and we mistake it for a snake. The fear of snake, the anxiety that it produces, all of them are real. Therefore, it can be called Sat that way, but the snake is unreal, therefore it is Asat. Things that are Asat and Sat simultaneously are Maya. That is a Maya that we talk about. Similarly, the water appearing in a mirage is also called as a Maya. So this is the core of what we call as a Vivartavada. This is essentially, it posits that the error is in the processing. The interface is an error in the processing. That interface appears because there is an error in the processing. That the Parabrahma Swarupa thinks, I am this body. Therefore, there is this. Not an independent creation. It's like that illusion of a snake on a rope. Illusion of a separate this thing from the ocean itself, wave or droplet of water. So basically it says, Satana tatha bhuta evatma swayamanya ivollasan jivata mupayativa mananat sthulatam gataha. Mananat sthulatam gataha. It's only by repeated thinking about I am this, and I am this, that the sthulatva is achieved. And how does they solve this again, this non-origination? Essentially through the Ajatavada. It's a very parsimonious solution for the conundrums that we have seen earlier. Basically, it says that universe has never fundamentally been generated, altered, or destroyed. And the point is basically mano bhavati bhutatma taranga ivavaridhe teneya mindra jala shri jagati pravitanyate. A shloka there says the mind is to the gross world just like a wave is to the ocean. That's why I was giving that example of that wave and ocean. And that mind, the consciousness here, with that jugglery or magic show, essentially of the world is spread out. And this is where the aparokshanubhuti versus algorithmic modeling becomes very important, because there is limits to the epistemological limits, because scientific pursuit of through equations versus meditative realization of the absolute reality. Hoffman is trying to do this through interface by mathematically refining the code, whereas Vasishtha says, entire screen, I'm the screen, I'm not the movie. That's basically what Vasishtha is saying. So is it Vichara will collapse the observer-observed dual entity. In fact, this is the same thing that Ramana Maharshi also says. He says, think who am I? That's all. And you will get to this question of what is consciousness. So it says, Yadidam drishyate sarvam jagat sthavara jangamam tat sushuptaviva swapna kalpante pravinashyati. The Yadidam, whatever is seen in the world, whether movable, immovable, sthavara jangamam, that sushuptaviva swapna. As we see the cessation of the dreams, when we go into the deep sleep mode, similarly all of this world will also disappear in that kalpante. What is that kalpa? Even that word is very beautiful. The kalpa means kalpana. It means imagination. So essentially what we are saying is, this is an imagination. The kalpa is a unit of time also in Bharatiya, this thing, right? So kalpa is the life of Brahma. We are saying kalpante. Brahma, that first thought said, okay, I will create. That arose. And then when that thought subsides, it's back to the ocean again. And this laboratory instruments and mathematical symbols, these are all elements generated by the interface. But if we want to see the true reality, we need to recognize that drashta. And I think there is a logical trap of using this interface tools to objectively model the drashta. And because scientist is an icon within the interface. And Jivan Mukti, I will finish in another 5 minutes. Jivan Mukti is essentially the state in which you see the state of that drashta, being drashta. Because you don't have to rewrite the space-time interface or escape it. You recognize that you're the screen, not the movie. That's it. And the main point of difference is, Hoffman talks about manipulating the interface boundaries. Vasishtha says there are no boundaries. And drashtasya satta hi bandha itya vidhiyate drashta drashya vashat baddho drashya bhave vimuchyate. Drashya bhave vimuchyate. When you don't see anything, you look at the picture of that ocean that I was showing, and you don't see the waves, but you have the drishti, the viewpoint of a water, then essentially everything is subsiding. And basically the Yoga Vasishtha provides this parsimonious, non-dual Advaita reality that lies beyond the limits of the formal logic. And I think Yoga Vasishtha completes what modern cognitive science has begun to explore through some of these theories. With that, I would like to stop here and end with one statement of Brahmajnana Valimala. Brahma satyam jaganmithya jivo brahmaivana parah anena vedyam satshastram iti vedanta dindimah. This is by the Shankaracharya. Namaste everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I would request Ma'am to please take the word. Any questions?
Yeah, one question. Sir,
Please.
so whatever we try to prove with the materialistic world, consciousness cannot be proved.
Yes.
It can only be experienced by individual person only. Whatever the algorithm is there, that is mere waste, sir. It is a reflection of their own intellectual thing. That's all it is.
So, I mean, we talk about aparokshanubhuti as the highest valid pramana in our traditions. And that is very important because we have to recognize the limits of our understanding also. And we also say this, right? I mean, yato vacha nivartante, where the words cannot touch. And then it just goes beyond all of this. But if we are trying to model it, again, that's what I was trying to prove, that not really. You're still stuck at the interface. If you have to go beyond the interface, we have to really look at the aparokshanubhuti, and there is really no substitute for that.
So I have some comments. You know, you are talking of space-time,
Yes.
Hoffman did, and Jagabosishto. But probably, I don't know, many people are not aware that Ernest Mach, he was guru of Albert Einstein. He wrote a book called Sensation and Analysis. There he mentioned two types of space-time and geometry. One is inductive geometry, that is Hindu geometry. He specifically termed Hindu geometry. And another is Greek geometry, which is deductive geometry. So what is Hindu geometry? He told sense-dependent geometry, which might be similar to what you are talking in case of Jagabosishto.
Thank you, Professor Roy. I did not know about that work. I'll talk to you and then definitely pursue that.
And another thing, you are talking of Hoffman's network. But in physics, there are two other very important networks. One is Smolin and Penrose networks, spin networks, and another myself, Roy and Abraham, we have also spatial network. And there are a lot of interesting things comes, and also consciousness arises from that network. You should also think of kind
Definitely,
of, you know.
I was only limiting myself to Donald Hoffman's work here because, again, but I was not aware of that other space-time that you had mentioned. I will definitely look into it. I'll also study probably more about yours and other Penrose
Okay.
papers. And then
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Murthy. We had chats earlier also. One important aspect that you very nicely figured out in Hoffman's approach was common shared reality. That is one of the primary areas probably you talked about. And what I feel another important aspect that's still missing is also you mentioned the first person experience. Maybe some way of representing metacognition. Of course, mathematically, no way we can represent first person experience. But at least operationally, the metacognition aspects, if introduced, probably it would make a difference. And second, I would like to hear from you. Is there really a common shared reality, objective common shared reality? If you go by Vivartavada, then certainly you call it illusory. Of course, there are the other parallel tracks of Madhvacharya.
Yes.
He calls the Panchavedas. Prakriti Veda, Jiva Prakriti Veda, Jiva Ishvara Veda, all these 5 Vedas. Of course, that's a difference at the very finer level. Even if you accept the Vyavaharika level, also the science at which it operates. So can we still go with objective shared reality?
Yeah, I don't see, that is the beauty of what Yoga Vasishtha is proposing. And regarding the first one, we'll have to see but then second point that you were talking about, common shared reality part, that's what Yoga Vasishtha says. See, why is it that we have a common shared reality? It is because we are part of that one wave, essentially, if I have to give that analogy, that we belong to this kalpa of the Brahma, because it is governed by some rules. There, all of these creatures, creation of this Brahma will have a shared objective reality. But some other Brahma will not share this. In fact, there are stories in the Yoga Vasishtha where they talk about a jiva moving from one Brahma's this thing to the another Brahma's creation, and then seeing very, very different things. But then the vasanas are same, so they actually have something similar, and then they actually talk about the question. There is a story, I'll take 2 minutes for that, where a king is basically made to sleep and go into deep sleep, dreaming state. There he dreams that he goes into a forest and then lives with the hunters there, and then is experiencing a lot of misery, lives for 60 years, and then dies, and then comes back. And then he wakes up and then finds himself to be here in this kingdom and he's sitting on his throne. 2 hours have passed. In his dream state, 60 years have passed. Then that is not the end of it. Next day, he remembers some of those places in in the forest. Then he says, that looks very similar to the forest outside my capital. Then he rides there and he actually finds the people who say, that person was dead few years ago. Then he is not able to understand what is this, all of these things. And this is the shared reality that I'm talking about. You can have multiple things like this. There is another story where, I think his name is Vidura, and there's a story of a Brahmin couple in a hut. They are experiencing a dream and they become some kind of a king and queen, and the king dies and then has another dream. So there are like 3 levels of dreams where they actually have to cross the Brahma's 3 creations. So the whole idea is, the summary of that is, if it is creation is rising from the one kalpa of a one Brahma kalpa, then there will be objective shared reality. If it is different Brahmas, each of them will have their own shared objective reality, everybody there. But entire substratum of that, essentially the Jala, is the same ocean.
Yeah, probably what Hoffman missed is that the bedrock of the all thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gantimurthy, for this very thought-provoking talk.
Thank you.
And yes, first-person reality is a reality of all of us. My mentors would say, if I'm hungry, I don't need a machine to tell me I'm hungry. I'm the best judge of my hunger. And the more we meditate, our mind becomes an. And Mandukya Upanishad very vividly talks about the 3 avasthatraya vichar, trigdrishya. They're giving very good insights into the first-person reality. And meditation is a good way to reach there. The practices are a good way to reach to that reality. And with this, we conclude this session. And maybe one thought that we can think of, do the 2 ontologies and epistemologies really need to meet, or can they coexist? Thank you so much.
I request Dr. Richa Chopra ma'am to kindly felicitate us. Thank you. Ma'am, thank you, sir. Next, I'd like to invite our session chair, Dr. Pushpendra Singh, to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Anirban Bandhopadhyay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are pleased to have the next talk by the Professor Anirban Bandhopadhyay. So the title of talk is Before Consciousness, Why a Self-Operating Mathematical Universe is Required for a Science of Mind. So Professor Bandhopadhyay is a senior scientist at National Institute for Material Science, Japan, and a member of the International Center for Material Nano-Architectonics. So he received his PhD in physics from Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, Kolkata. And his research focused on the nanotechnology, brain-inspired computing, and biophysical basis of cognition. He is known for the groundbreaking work on the nano-brain architecture and frequency-based information. Yeah.
Please.
Okay. So, yeah. So, yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, please. So, I would like to invite Professor to the stage. Please, sir. Give him a big hand.
Yeah. You are here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm the last keynote speaker of this conference, and thanks to Professor Behera for this. And the success of this conference, you can see it here, that auditorium is filled with people. How could you do this? Because of this great management. Because I mean, I was the speaker in the first Mbcc conference, and there were hardly few people, only organizers sitting here and there. And then we finished a keynote speech in 5 to 8 minutes. So you see the transformation that has happened in the last 3 years. Okay, so I realized that I never spoke about what we do on IKS, Indian Knowledge System, in IIT Mandi. I never did. I talked about quantum, I talked about other topics, but never about the Indian Knowledge System. So I thought that even though self-operating mathematical universe is a topic, I would tell some glimpses of IKS work that we do. And the image that you are seeing is a cell inside your body in the tissues, and they are rotating around each other. That is the real practicality. And I will show you polyatomic time crystal. PTC you have heard several times. You saw today morning, Josepha showed the results from Pushpendra's lab scanning. So we scanned several people, and it was very surprising for us to get very good results. And so you see that many clocks are there. So it's a different kind of language. So how do we come to that language? Why is it important? And how it is important for understanding consciousness. So I would like to get into that as much as possible. So first is, can I get this? Okay. So we are living in a very interesting era. And this era is the language of invariance. So whatever you do, whatever the complex data sets are there, when you are using LLM, asking ChatGPT, write program, write my paper, plot the figures, and so many things. Do you know that deep inside, actually, for particular phenomenon, there is a special geometric shape that is coming out. And this is the reason that you are always saying that LLM is going to collapse, AI is going to collapse, because by 2027, we need 8 to 10 gigawatts of power. So one nuclear reactor is around 250 megawatts or something. So by 2030, we need more than 50 or 60 gigawatts of power. This is the reason. Because these kind of complex geometric shapes get lots of phenomena. And at the highest level, you need to write these shapes into a linear circuitry. But hopefully, our brain don't have a linear circuitry. So what kind of circuitry do you have? And what kind of hardware do you need to get into, get humanity to the next future of LLM? So here, many people are meditation experts. I never meditated in my life before Mexico trip, few days back. I was in Mexico and in retreat, and then they taught me how to meditate. So 45 minutes in the morning, 45 minutes in the evening, I started meditating, and I realized two things. Those who are experts here, they can tell me if I'm wrong. It's very difficult. I can get inside my body, go through the blood vessels, and I can go out to the universe from my mind. I close my eyes and I go everywhere, but I cannot be both the places at the same time. Can anybody do it? Because I found this is very difficult. I can go inside my blood vessels and everything. I go outside the universe. I can, 45 minutes, I can close my eyes and I can remain over there. But I can't. Then I see the past is coming to me and it's projecting to the future and disturbing me in the cycle of consciousness. I thought that it could be not just me, the elephant or a tree or maybe the solar system, like any planetary systems. If they have a complex information processing, they could have these three ghosts or three souls who would be there taking the past to the future and then bringing it back. It could be for the black holes, because as you know, for every single galaxy, you have 10 to the power 22 number of black holes. So basically, if you take a big circle and put a black dot for the black holes, you will only have black holes. It will be a black circle. So the first work that I did was understanding how, if you make the sound Om, then how the vortex would look like. So we are creating with the 14 crores a laboratory in Gujarat University, a kind of very special anechoic chamber, where if you pronounce Om, there will be 3D distribution. If you say, what would be the structure that will come? So I told Nirja ma'am, the Vice Chancellor of Gujarat University, that, okay, so why not we do this? So I said, add Guru Shishya Parampara. So I had to make 2 stages in the anechoic chamber. And we are going to test how the sound structure would look like. At the same time, 108 Shiva's dance moves. So these are the electromagnetic simulations which we carried out with different organs, and 3 layers of electromagnetic field distributions we found. So you all know, those who work here on antenna, that there are HFSS or CST softwares using which you can simulate. So different positions of the body for Nataraja's 108 dances. A few of them I'm showing here. And if you see the movement and you convert it into the electromagnetic, because my blood is flowing, so it has hemoglobin, it has ferrous. So a kind of electromagnetic field is generated, which we measured. Of course, other people also measured. And we are also going to test this kind of thing. And this is Sanskrit letters. So Sanskrit letters, what kind of 3D geometric architecture or vortex shape it creates. These 2 way we are rotating. So this is A, E, E, and Ka, Kha, Ga, Ga, Ho, Cha, Cha, Ja, Ja, Ho. And I'm a big fan of Maharshi Kapil. In his book, he wrote that, that if we want to understand consciousness, we have to create a language where a single letter, vibration of a single letter, would create that kind of feeling, cognitive experience or emotional experience in the mind of a listener. To me, this was the greatest philosophical statement in the history of mankind. So when I read this, because I'm not a follower of religion, I just read the text as a scientist. When I saw this, I created this. And nobody created this kind of thing for Sanskrit letters, but I believed in him that every single letter should have some sensation. And I went on with EEG machines and other machines to trying to see that every single letter, pronunciation of every single Sanskrit letter, how does it affect the mind? So I would like to say that the result that I will present today, majority of result is because of the generous contribution of Professor Behra and his dream. And one dream I would like to talk about is understanding the origin of life and consciousness. And this is the setup under preparation. So you can see over there, you have horizontally electromagnetic field. You give the moisture, the water bubbles are made to float using ultrasound from bottom and ultrasound from top. And there are these kind of sensors, optical fiber sensors that you are seeing. The other side we cannot show because this is a typical setup where you have X, Y, G axis. X axis is microwave, Y axis infrared. Why am I doing this? Because imagine 4.5 billion years ago when life was being created. So we are in this room, in this auditorium. If the temperature is 27 degree, then you have 5.5 to 6 terahertz oscillations everywhere, free available energy. At that point of time, it was 3 degree, 4 degree less, but it was nearly the same. So that IR band is there. Above IR, we know atomic vibration happens. And little lower than IR, you have these microwave bands, the meter waves, centimeter waves. So what happened where the lower side, you have functional groups vibrate, higher side, atoms vibrate. So atom to functional group is crossed by a thermal barrier. Why does that happen? So using the ultrasound, float the water molecules, put few protein molecules or other kind of thing, and substrate-free characterization. Since this is my 26th year in research. And 26 years ago, I started. And it was always, I thought that substrate-free characterization is most important part. So I would just like to show you how, so when you try to do research, something guides you. And this name is actually given by director, and I'm sorry for the mistake that has happened. The name is Upper Mahabhuta Simulator. I don't understand much about it. I'm presenting Pushpendra's work. So basically, different topological geometries we would like to acquire from the vibrations that is measured. So one of the finest tools to do quantum measurement is to look at the vibration frequency and amplitude phase together. So these are the kind of setups are being optimized. Unless it is fully optimized, we will not disclose any results, but these are the simulator where we are trying to find geometric invariant. I will rotate around geometric invariants only. The reason is that, as I said at the outset, that geometric invariant is the key for the future where we are going to. Now, look at this group. So this is Professor Tanushree Datta and their group. They worked in DST, where Pushpendra also joined, but Pushpendra's photograph is not there. It was in 2008, 2019, and we connected the brain of 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%, 11%, 12%. And Keysight gave us all the instruments free of charge, and we connected with electromagnetic fields. The first result, I would say, that you see this kind of photograph everywhere, that for emotion, if I take a thermal camera and focus on you, I would see something like this for every cognitive effect. I say this is absolute junk. If you take a thermal camera and you go on checking, so I checked on 289 human subjects, you will find some people, for different kind of emotional cognitive experiences, their nose gets hot and cold. Some people's cheek, some people's forehead, there is a trishul kind of trident structures where the heating happens. Why? Because your skull is different, and I mapped with all the blood vessels that are coming to your face. And cranial nerves that are coming to your face, and it has a completely different structure. So I thought that why we are getting so many different kind of variations. Then we found that 12 classes of humans are there, and their structure is different. So some people nose, so nose category, if I check all the people here, I will find several people with nose class. I will find several people with lip class. So they will have lip changing in temperature. So Pushpendra did the simulation of the blood vessels coming out and how the transformation happens. We modeled it and published it. I'm not going into the analysis. Then this is my personal test. If anybody wants to do and wants to know about his psychology, his deep subconscious mind, then I can tell many things about you. Though this is in the book. I've been doing this since age 11 or 12, since my father taught it. And this we are going to do for 1 million people in a South Indian temple. So we have already got the fund. And Professor Tanushree Datta, because I'm not a psychologist, I don't have a background, so Tanushree Datta does all the human subject studies. So she is going to test this when the person enters the temple and when he comes out. So I think there is an organization which is donating a large amount of money. So there will be, in front of the temple, they will be tested with thermal and this kind of work. So this is the polyatomic time crystal that Josepha showed today very, very nicely. And so in Pushpendra's lab, they are looking into different kind of mental states, and this kind of nested spheres are there. I will try to make you understand how this nested sphere comes. So this is laboratory, live. You see many, many clocks, many variations. Why many clocks? Because 11 days, you get a new skin. In 3 months, you get a new blood. In the 17th month, you get a new kidney. Do you know that every moment since you are here, proteins are dying few hours, and new proteins are replacing it. So the replacement clocks are there. So it's a huge architecture of clocks, and this is the subject of Pushpendra's PhD thesis, that mapping the clock. But now in his lab, here in some of the buildings, I don't know where, very complex to go. Some of the building, it is there, and if you can put in your brain, you can see life. And the most important thing that we discovered few days back when Stuart and all the people were there, we were checking, that every single human being has a very particular time domain activity. And Joseph Jackson is there. JJ, are you here? Yeah. So he is a genius. He never went to school, and he's a billionaire. So, so he has created several incredible things in his life. So I wanted to check with me and him, and we are just in the opposite direction. So for him, the gigahertz brain is only active. All are silent. And for me, every frequency band is active. So you saw for Josepha, it was brain, only the central part of the brain was active. So lateralization was missing. Anyway, So what is the fundamentally we are changing as far as the brain cognition and emotion is concerned? So brain has every single location, many, many clocks. And those clocks are basically generating different kind of time domain structures, and they are coming together and building an integrated clock assembly. That is the sphere. So not only that, these clocks also exchange information. They are interacting with each other. So that is what happens when you are thinking. And you can see this live if you go to Pushpendra's lab. And you can see, so we increased 1%, 2%, 3%. When we reached 8%, then we saw 8%'s brain we clocked with DDG, 8 DDGs. And then we found that we were getting geometric invariance. For 12%, we actually saw live the geometric architectures. And we identified 91 cognitive perceptive markers. And we published in a book. Now, a very interesting study. So I will show you, the video is not very good, but be with me. It was first attempt for us to understand the, how the geometric invariance come, or the emotion cognitive marker, because I never believed that one person can be conscious. Because if the anechoic chamber I put you, after 2-3 minutes you will say, take me out. So the DDG is fundamentally very different. In EEG, you just measure the current voltage. It's the IV characteristics. But in DDG, just a natural burst that occurs, just like a lock-in amplifier. Anybody knows lock-in amplifier? Okay, only 2-3 people knows. Okay, lock-in amplifier, what you do, a natural burst occurs, and you send a nanosecond or picosecond pulse, and you time and again you probe the whole thing. So what happens if there is a noise, they cannot reappear continuously. So they are cancelled out. So this principle is used. That's why it's very, very expensive. And very big, bulky, because honestly, if you want to do this, you need to change the technology significantly. Okay, we bypass 2 human subjects, no need. Can you get a little sound? So we took Ravana's Stotram, Shiva Stotram, and we took Rama's. So Rama's, you see subject, human subject, they are singing together. Just look at it. Different human subjects, different time domain syncing. In the EEG, you will not find any synchronization, but in the DDG, you will find. So basically, you see megahertz, kilohertz, and gigahertz. We are seeing synchronization and synchronized circuits among the 8 subjects. Because 8 subjects, we had to increase slowly to 8 subjects. Otherwise, we could not see the global synchrony or global synchronization. And so when I said this result to my friend in Martin Teams, I was very excited. I told him that I got this result. He said, Anirban, in the room, you put smell, because there are 5 sensors in the human body. Why not you put the smell and you see what happens? So let's see what happens when I put the smell. Can you see? Can you see? Are you able to see? Just only one pulse is coming at a sharp gap. Is it visible over there? I don't know. But you can see only one pulse in the top region. Only one. So the nanosecond level synchronization is happening among the subjects. So it sharpens your global synchrony. But then what I did from Japan, I brought some sweets and I gave the sweets. When I gave sweets, you see the noise. So it is all over the temporal band. And the global synchrony and the disruption that was happening, it just disappeared. Then what I did is, actually, Martin just told me that you should look at with smell. So we filled the room with a different smell, with a very intense smell. And but I wanted to do all the tests. So I asked them to hold hands and try to see. So you understand this environment. 8 people in a dark room so that they cannot see each other. In the evening time, they were, and I'm very, very particular about the human subject experiments. So they should eat similar thing. Their age were 19 to 23, 22 and 22, that's just like that. Everybody were very good student, passed CAT with higher rank. So it's better to work with the most intelligent people. And we put them, so-called most intelligent people, and they were at the same time, same class or something like that, so that I could compare the results. Now when they hold a hand, then the synchrony disappeared. And to the top right, those who are from robotics or electromagnetic physics, you can see to the top right that you will notice in the top right corner, just look at megahertz to gigahertz, what is happening. There is a oscillation. There is a spiral burst that is going out and coming down. Just notice it.
So when the brain stops circulating by holding hands, the music is not played. The brain rhythm.
You see the evolution, the LCR circuit, the resonating circuit of them is changing. So it is a one-to-one comparison with EEG on the 8 person's head and simultaneously DDG. So we wanted to check, and we saw, EEG move hand, it will change, but you go to Pushpendra's lab with DDG will not. We took it to Stewart's conference, and then we kept it there. And then CEOs of many EEG companies came, and they did something like this, dance and something, it doesn't change. Anyway, so I will go to the now hospital studies. So this is the group. I'm standing there, and Saifullah Tipu was there, blue, and Sarika Katiyar they are the chief doctors, and the operation theater, it requires a lot of people. So I will now talk about some of the operation theater with the DDG, what do you see? So in every single hospital in the world, wherever surgery happens, before the surgery, they have applied propofol. These are different human subjects, different plots. So they go to unconscious state, and they remain there, and then they come back. And you know that Indian hospitals have a typical thing. I never worked in the hospitals, Indian hospitals, so I didn't know that you are not treated like a human being. They charge as much as possible, so very fast you fall, and then as soon as the operation happens, they drag you because another person is standing over there. You have to just move your hand, and then they take out. So this is the condition of government hospitals, and maybe here everybody goes to private hospitals, I don't know. So you get kind of a triplet awake state and control state. 3 bands are there. As soon as you go to this BIS score, in every hospital they check. So they keep it around 40. And normally nothing should happen, but actually you see typical burst appears. And those bursts, phase 3 like bursts, are actually signature for us. And their dynamics is a signature that there are many, many subconscious layers, and we could characterize with that. And those bursts are similar to the microtubule bursts that we reported in 2016. So these work are 8 years apart. So one is neurophysiology that was carried out in Japan in 2013-14, and that one is in hospital in 2021-2022. So this is me working in the hospital, and the person is undergoing surgery. So gastroenterologic surgery, and you will see that I am touching my head, and then I check this kind of special bursts whose width is microtubule bursts that we reported earlier is coming out, and then we work with the team continuously. And then in the megahertz region, we check the bursts. The operation was going on, and I observed continuously every single phase that the person goes through. Before I moved to coma states and a person towards the death, because I was very interested how death happens and how a person moves from GCS state, say 12 to slowly coma 3, and then death occurs. And also how consciousness comes back and goes back. But before that, I would like to tell you, we saved several people's life. How? Because for different layers of our consciousness level, high frequency level, 200 to 700 nanoseconds, there were some typical bursts, the bursts that you saw. Or we will see triplet triplet means it is okay. He is conscious. So I found during the operation, one person, the burst disappeared and triplet came. And I started telling all the doctors that, okay, do something, he's awake. No, BC score is fine. He's not awake, he's unconscious. But it was not true. So when I said, Gaurav, he was in the photograph, he said, okay, Anirban, what is your problem? My problem is he is awake at the 7th layer of consciousness, unconscious state. Okay, so far for normal medical, this is unconscious. So he then checked the blood glucose and he was in hyperglycemia with 42. And then he gave the glucose came to 130, 135. And the unconscious state returned. It was so beautiful experience for me. So I told the student, and then after that, she, Bani Shetty, who is the first author of most of these our clinical study papers. So she worked there for months and saved many people's life just by telling which consciousness level you are. So what happens is you may be unconscious in your upper state, but somewhere down the line, if there is a threat, imminent threat to your life, then you will have changes. Another very interesting study. I wanted to understand which part of the brain first the consciousness comes. So you see, the burst first comes, starts here, and from the frontal part, and slowly it spreads. So that is red part is just spreading all over. And then when you come back, then temporal part is first, and then it comes back to the back side, and finally you see the triplet. Triplet spectrum is shown there, signal for awake, and that comes lastly here, your frontal part, just between your eyebrows. And literally in the hospital, I hold the hand of the lady. I didn't allow her to go outside the hospital. So what do? To wake you up, they give you injection after injection. They don't care you are a human being. They give injection after injection and then take you out. I just hold that. I will not allow her to go until I find out where is the last point this person awakes. So, and I found the final point is here. So this part, this whole region and the eyebrow upper part remains in the burst state, that is unconscious state, for a long time. And the person can move hand. The person can move hand. If they were asking, can you move hand? Haath uthao, sir ghumao. Okay, you can do it. Okay, you are awake, conscious. Take out. So I said, no. For my standard, she should be conscious. So then she came, and then she said, why are you touching me? I said, okay, she is conscious now, take out. Okay, so then for these three states are there. When the person dies, so many accident happens, persons go there for many accidents. So I'm not going to details of death. But what happens is, instead of 3 peaks, you get 2, slowly 1, and then disappears. So this person is about to die, and just see the spectrum. Then I wanted to have to plant. And this is I hope that this slide Professor Behra likes. This slide is for you. So you see, apple I am touching, there is no triplet. So apple is not conscious, so you can eat. Okay? So this is spinach, and when the seed is there, you touch it, nothing. But when the seed is germinating, coming out, at the center, if I touch at a very particular location, we found there is almost like GCS, coma state 1 or coma state 2 or coma state 3. So you are vegetarians, you are safe. So then I wanted to understand, because Pushpendra was very much interested when he was in Japan with the spinal cord. And he was simulating the spinal cord architectures many times. But when we look at the triplet, it has a very different kind of architectures. I'm not getting into detail because I'm speeding up. I just want to tell you that 200 to nanoseconds, a few nanoseconds region, when the person is thought to be conscious, we found one very beautiful 15-phase cycle that is happening. So we can create a polyatomic time crystal. So Pushpendra's system, if it is reduced ever, maybe 4 years, 5 years time down the line, I don't know when, but if we can carry that system somehow in the operation theater, then we will be able to figure out very different kind of complex language. We can decode, and we can save people unlike ever before. And that was another kind of rhythm that we got with the 12 phase, different kind of bus moving, and a lot of things happen in a periodic manner. So we checked it. So suppose you want to build a quantum computer, and then you want to increase the number of qubits. So if you go to 32, so then what you do is your phase angle changes. So 360 by 32. But polyatomic time crystal, the kind of nested clock architecture we are talking about, is a different language where what do, you take a slowest clock in the middle and then the faster clocks outside. And the very fast clock at the extreme outset. So this is how the information expands. And we will do that at many different ways. So we created a language, we call it polyatomic time crystal. What you do is 1D space, whatever the data you give me, it could be cybersecurity data, it could be weather forecasting data. We would look at the variables just like a space, okay, and find loops in it, contour. Then we put it in a curved surface. Then we try to find out in a escape time fractal. Here, I would like to stop and I would like to tell you one important thing, that we consider space as a loop, time as a loop, because one speaker, I think in this conference said, there is a one major difference between West and the East, and that is time, that is loop. And in our case, we take it loop, and ordering of a space gives us time. Let me play it again. And then on the sixth dimension, we take the combination or composition or non-commutativity. So this is how we create polyatomic time crystals. So when you are seeing this kind of fancy pictures in Pushpendra's lab, it's coming up. Inside that, this is the philosophy that is happening. So these kind of transformations are happening to your brain microstates. So this picture I showed. So using this technology, since 2007, 2008, 9, this is the smallest life form we created. We call it PCMS. So today morning, the genetic paper is out, gene reports. I just tweeted today morning. So this is the polyatomic time crystal computer that we want to build. Due to conformality, it looks like the information. This is and this concert. Because today is a very happy moment for me, because I always wanted that if we understand the language of nature, there should be some evidence. If you want to understand consciousness, if you say that you understand consciousness, make an artificial brain. If you really say that you understand the language of biology, then make a machine, and you make a nano machine or something, put it in the body, and it should be neutral. Even if you take one paracetamol, 700 proteins get upregulated, 600 proteins get downregulated. Can you make a machine? That machine, if I put in your body, only 3, 4, or 5 proteins go. So that paper now published today morning. We have worked on transcriptomics for many, many years, to 2007-8. So my postdocs were there. So polyatomic time crystal becomes the language, and using that language, we built many different kind of tools or something. But at the bottom, always PTC. So you know that our project from IIT Mandi for quantum computer project got accepted. So when the project got accepted, they did a very nice thing, Sankha, who actually planned the whole project. So he said that from now onwards, the project name will be Polyatomic Time Crystal 1024, PTC 1024. So I loved it. So made all the group names he changed. He was so happy. And then PTC. What is actually happening? So in real time, if you see, then these are different clocks during the information processing are born or dead. It could be brain microstate. It could be weather forecasting data. We don't care. We don't care because we don't have any contextuality to add apart from geometric contextuality. This is difficult word, but just assimilate it. But it could be one channel. It could be forecast for 16 channel. It could be 256 channels. And the final target is to deliver 1024 channel PTCs working together. Why 1024? Because when Pushpendra modeled the human brain, then he modeled 1023 different classes of clocks in the whole brain-body architecture. So if we want to create a very conscious machine by quantum, I want to model the consciousness, we need 1023 classes of clocks. So I imagine that one day we will be able in a quantum computer, 1024 class, if we are successful in this project, we will be able to check. So that means the geometric information will grow like this, like clock up, clock inside a clock, inside a clock, inside a clock. And because I am not going into mathematics, that's the mathematical structure. This is Pushpendra thesis most important work. When people saw in Japan, then they were just shocked. So it means in the world of consciousness or conventional neuroscience, you will go only one sphere, just one clock. But here, 1023 different kind of clock systems were mapped from different literatures, works, and something relentlessly, and they were put together. So now, which device shall we use?
Resistors block and
oh, sorry. I have to block the sound. Okay. So, helical structures have got a beautiful property. If you send light, it can create optical or magnetic vortex. If you say magnetic field, you can get light, second harmonic generation. So all kind of quantum properties you can get. So this year, I think Pushpendra published soliton polariton condensate, a quantum feature of this helical nanowires. What you do is basically different size of helical nanowire you can create, and you can get the clock, and you can create the whole 3D clock architectures. So basically the idea is in a gel beaker, we can create these helical nanowires and then put together and create the information architecture. So if, as I said, if you know what is the language of nature, then make an artificial brain. So Brodmann, since 1880 to 1910, dissected the brain and found 47 different kind of neural network circuits. We replicated all of them. All these first 16 that you see, we have proposed it to the MATI for 1,000 channels. So there will be identical 16 computers we will connect. Each one will have a particular type of gel. Basically, number one is a helix that we use. But it will be like 47 different kind of gels we have created to emulate the whole brain. So now JJ is sitting here. So with him, we are going to start a venture. So NIMS has already given us permission. So it will be a massive venture to create an artificial brain with all the 47 organic gels. But prototype is already ready. But before that, I want to give you a short experience. How does it feels like in this gel? What is this gel? Gel are kind of oligomers. The 47 different gels, we will go one by one through this world. So if you enter inside a chemical beaker and you try to go, how do you feel like? So they have basically oligomer means it will be 15 to 20 carbon atoms, C20 or C15, C17. So two different kind of salts are put together, and then they start growing from single molecule, and then they grow entire beaker. So we replicated, we saw we tested many organic gels, and then we found which are the nearest to the 47 Brodmann's neural network regions that was created. Do we want to create consciousness in artificial brain? No. We want to go vibration-wise, polyatomic time crystal-wise, as close as possible to the human brain, so that we can isolate and understand how the human brain works and how a thought process is generated. So that is kind of an objective. So you can find that many different layers of, and you can understand the kind of hard work that has gone through. So actually I got job in Japan to create artificial brain, and I was honest with my objective that if I want to make it, it will not be a switching device, it will really be the neural network that I want to believe. And then they also believed in me that we trust you, but your result will not be visible today. To 2005, I remember the day when Yoshio Bando was very young professor, and then young means double than my age, but they live much longer, no? So he told me that one day you will be able to see it after 20 years. 20 years later, I saw him in the road because he moved to Australia, he came. I said, Anirban, how is your brain? I said, my brain is fine, sir, but would you like to see? Then I reminded him that your one sentence changed my life. So I was just a PhD student. He took me, broke the law, and gave me the job. So that I could go ahead. No budget, nothing, and do whatever you want to do. And I was honest with it. So we have just finished. So all the 47, one by one, I didn't leave any of them. So this is the model Pushpendra created for the whole brain, and many different kind of major clocks are there. This is Pushpendra's doctoral thesis work again, all the components. Basically 22-year-old kid, young Indian kid died in America. So his father gave the head to hospital. So they sliced it off. And we, Pushpendra connected, paid the money and bought the designs. But he couldn't work, and relentlessly, months after months, he had to work for several months, no? Almost years, to correct those structures and make it accurate layer by layer. Connectomes, fiber by fiber he created. So we started creating these fibers. So Ajay Chakrabarti sang here. So Ajay Chakrabarti's student, I talked to Ajay Chakrabarti, his student is sitting over there, and then he came and started singing too, because this artificial brain sings. So you can sing it to him, and I just don't want to, I want to cut it short. But this is last year in Japan. A German artist came and told me that I want to take your artificial brain, I want to put music and communication system in a room, and I want to keep it for 2 months. I want to see how robust is this technology. So regarding robustness, because I will be meeting Professor Behera after 2 years of very, very dirty fights. I mean, only he and I know what we went through to bring this project. I wanted to give him 64-channel quantum computer completely. I brought it in a suitcase. I built it because I wanted to have the product before the project starts. So I started 64-channel much earlier. So I brought it, and it is there. It is not, power is not going, a leakage, and many, many kind of systems. So it was a test for my life and my honor that in Okayama, 2 months it would work, because I cannot go. NIMS will not allow me. So, but here, for 2 months it worked. So this is where they set it up, 2 artificial brains, and they were sitting, and they worked. But all the kids, they destroyed my, my other parts of the brain totally. And this was kind of a system, just a glimpse that what we do and how we are put into test. So if you are a scientist and make a product, your life could be very, very dangerous, delicate. Before you tell the public, make sure it works for a long, long time. I brought it here, and many people here, they know what I have gone through. I was almost in tears when this device totally broke down, because I wanted to show everybody. I showed some people that it was working, but power flow, power surge, and so many things happen. Anyway, so we found geometric invariance from the communications, and I would tell you one story before we end. The geometric invariance we discovered, and I'm publishing now relentlessly. Top left book is published. Silicon AI has to go, organic brains will take over. The conventional quantum computers would find no use case. So this book I'm writing, it will be out very soon. And other books will also be, but there are many complaints against me that my books are very expensive. So this time, those who are member, Kindle member, it's free, and you get minimal $7 or $8 charge. So anyway, so the point is that I wanted to say that when 2 brains were kept in our lab, and whenever there was a people in the canteen, in NIMS canteen, we understood that their activity was much more. And Pushpendra, sir, baat karna start kar diya, laga de. He used to put camera, and we recorded, and he created a database. Now we have transferred this whole database to IIT Mandi. Not in NIMS, we are not growing anymore. Pushpendra is growing. So thank you very much for your attention and time, and I hope we will be meeting.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful talk. So we may have only one question, because we are running very late. Please give him mic.
Sir, what you did is excellent work, sir. Superb, marvelous work, sir. One thing what you experimented in the hospital, no, sir, you can experiment here also. Because every human being, in the night, when he goes into the deep sleep, he leaves the body. So if you can do that experiment, you can know the point, at what point the soul is leaving the body. Then you can experiment and you can know at which exact point it is happening.
My response is that today morning Josepha gave the answer, because Josepha was present, Stuart was present, or everybody was present. We were seeing each other's brain, and everybody's brain normally looks same in EEG, but in DTG when you go, everybody has a very particular temporal band where they are active and wave. So it gives me a lot of hope and at the same time concern that we have to create a database. We have to understand, just like thermal imaging, we found 12 classes. Now we are going for 1 million human subject in temple. For DTG also, that's what Josepha told, and everybody was telling, that we need to identify how many classes of humans are there in the world. I mean, it would not be more than 8 or 10 or something like that. So 12 band also, after a lot of experiment, we reached 12 band. Many human subject experiment. So when we reach there, then we can perform your experiment, not just that. My dream is when person goes to coma, because my father was there, I just saw and then I removed the life support system. So it was the most dangerous decision that I had to take before I turned 30. So if we can get that language, I played music for 15 days for my father, but I want that those people like me suffer, they can talk.
Okay.
Okay, so we will conclude the session. Let's thank to him for the fantastic task. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. Now we'll commence the last session before lunch, and this is also the last session in the auditorium, I mean to say. After that, we'll have few sessions in other rooms. In the interest of time, because this session is between you and lunch, I'll request 3 invited speakers to keep their talks to about 15 minutes, if that is possible, so that we could still go to lunch at about 2 o'clock. So first is Dr. Ashutosh Simha. He'll be talking about consciousness in the interval between thoughts. So Dr. Ashutosh currently is a consultant for UAV defense systems and a professor in computer science at Jyoti Institute of Technology in Bangalore. He's also an adjunct faculty at the National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore. And apart from his scientific research, he's deeply rooted in Vedic studies and serves as a senior member at Vedanta Bharati. Dr. Ashutosh.
Is this working? Yeah. Okay. I'm audible. All right. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So this prayer to Bhagavan Shankaracharya, Alayam Karunalayam. So when asked, why this is said, why is he an ocean of compassion? This talk is something to do with that, which is a disciple comes and says, look, I have not practiced any yoga. I have not practiced Ashtanga yoga. I have not practiced Samadhi. I have not practiced Dhyana. Maybe I'm even struggling at Yama and Niyama. Do I have a shot at liberation? Okay, and this text that I'm basing my talk on, called Laghu Vakya Vritti, exactly answers this point. Okay, is there a sort of, I won't call it shortcut, but is there another aspect to the ultimate realization that can happen within one's mind? And that is what is this concept called Sandhi, or the interval between thought constructs. So I'll try to go a little bit quick. Now, this is a shloka, what it's talking about is, within us there is two senses of I, two senses of self. On the one hand, what this verse is saying is that through all the states of life, from childhood balya to yauvana to vardhakya, there is one entity that is always unchanging. That's why we refer to ourselves and say, I who was in school, I who was in middle school, I who was in college, I who am now an adult. On the other hand, there is also the sense of change, saying that I am hungry, I am angry, this is my perception now, this is my perception now. So how do we reconcile both these entities? Now, for that, an analogy that is given in the Panchadashi is, there is a wall that is illuminated by the sun. Think of a wall outside. And there is a mirror which is also beaming part of the sunlight onto a small portion of the wall. Okay, and this mirror's nature is always changing. Its orientation, everything is always changing. Meaning that the whole space was illuminated uniformly by the sun. On the other hand, this mirror changes the way it partially illumines at every point of time. Now, these two entities in the Shastra is called as Kutastha and Chidabhasa. Okay, so Kutastha is what we call pure consciousness, that which we want to attain. And Chidabhasa is this sense of ego, the sense of I who is doing the sadhana, always changing in its phase. Now, how do we identify this, or how do we isolate this, continuing with the same analogy? Now, you think of this wall that was illuminated by the sun, and not just one mirror, but several other mirrors or lenses or whatever other instrument, illuminating different portions of the wall also. Now, in between any of those, okay, so in between, let's say there are two mirrors illuminating different portions, there is a small portion in between in the wall which is only illuminated by the sun and not by its reflected light. And that portion is where one can identify or isolate this entity called Kutastha. Now, how do we isolate these two things, or how do we differentiate both of these is, another simple example that is given is, you have water that is heated in fire, and then you use the same water to heat something else, like a vegetable that you want to cook, or you want to heat your own body with that water, any other thing. Okay? So on the one hand, what we say is that the water is what heated the vegetable. On the other hand, what we say is, no, it was the fire that actually heated the body. The water only absorbed that fire from the original source. So this entity called reflected consciousness, or Chidabhasa, is exactly like that water, and that fire is exactly like the Kutastha. Meaning that there is this process that is happening within us, constantly changing at every point in time. At no point is it constant, at no two kshanas is it constant, but that entity is what absorbs pure consciousness, and that is used to illumine all other processes, external processes or sensations, etc. Okay, so our goal is to go from what we are all used to, this entity called Chidabhasa, the changing sense of consciousness, to the unchanging true consciousness. Now, how do we do this isolation? The same text, Laghu Bhakya Vritti, gives a very interesting analogy. What it says is that there is a string of pearls. Okay, so this string of pearls is our entire mind, all the string of different thought constructs that occur. And the thread that supports this string of pearls is nothing but the Kutastha. Now, where can you identify that thread? If you look at this, is in between any of those two pearls, you can identify that thread. Similarly, in between any two thought constructs, can we identify that pure consciousness? In fact, can we actually get liberated? Okay, this was the question posed by the student. And then he starts asking that, okay, when does this occur? Okay, and this is another text that expands this, called Tripura Rahasya. it gives a few examples. Okay, so one of them is, there is an object that you wanted for a very, very long time. I give this example in all my talks of a cricketer badly wanting a wicket. He's trying to bowl for 1 hour at the stumps, badly trying to get him out, and he really wants it. And not only that, it says, yat chirad vanchitam, you wanted it for very long. Alabhyatvena nishchitam, meaning you had decided that that's something far-fetched. Or like a scientist, you want a result that you want to prove, but you feel it's a very high, a very tall ask, okay? But at some point you crack the problem, or in this case he gets the wicket. At that point, akasmat, okay? Suddenly you gratify that long lasted desire. Naveda bahyam vapi antaram. You take this exact scenario. Your mind is not functioning outside through the senses, nor is it cogitating on anything inside, within, okay? So, nishthet na nidraya akrantaha, nor is it in a state of sleep. Sa samadhi udiritaha. That state is what is called instantaneous or kshanika samadhi. And what is interesting is, it is not only in the joyous moments, but even in the case of fear. An example that's given is, you're walking somewhere in a forest and Vyagradi, there's a tiger that pounces suddenly in your path. You also reach exactly the same state. In shock, and now this is more interesting, is the intervals that occur in between states of waking, dream and deep sleep. Okay, so when you transition from waking to dream, or you transition from dream to deep sleep, or very clearly when you transition from deep sleep back to waking. And another example is, let's say that you look at the tip of a branch of a tree, okay? You're focusing on one such cognition, sense cognition, and suddenly you have a totally uncorrelated cognition like the moon in the sky, okay? You're focusing here, and then there's a sudden shift in focus. At this point also, madhye tan nirvikalpakhyam manaha lakshya sarvada. That interval between the two orthogonal thought constructs is also what is called a nirvikalpa state of the mind. Okay, and now our question is this, that if we indeed encountered pure consciousness, as the Shastra says, in these sandhis, okay, or in these intervals, then why on earth did we not get liberated? It says, sati sampadhyamahe naviduhu. Every night in deep sleep, one encounters that pure consciousness, the goal of every sadhaka. Then why did one not get liberated? Why did one not get liberated in these sandhis? And the cause of that is something called mula ajnana. Okay? And ajnana here does not mean the absence of knowledge. It's an existent entity. Okay? It is not the absence of something. It is something that is obscuring that realization to occur. And that is what we will try to attack today in this problem. Now, one example for explaining this ajnana that's given in this text is, there is this night owl. What happens to it is that in the broad daylight, when the sun is shining in all its glory, that's exactly the time it is blinded. Now when you ask, what was it that blinded the night owl? It was that light source itself. So ajnana is something like that. The very locus of ajnana is that prakasha, okay, is that consciousness. But that itself is responsible for you not realizing that consciousness. And now the task is, how do we remove it? How do we isolate it? Now this is another very popular example. Many of you have already seen this. You stare at the central dot for a few seconds, then you'll see that the bright 3 yellow dots are going to disappear. You can just try this. Okay? Meaning, it's not like you were not seeing the yellow dot. You were seeing it, but you were not seeing it. And the Upanishad says something called pashyan vai tanna pashyati. Though you encounter consciousness, you do not experience it. Then what is it that we do experience? This is an analogy in the Shastra, very often quoted. There is this sparkler in Deepavali, right? And when you move the sparkler really fast, you see various shapes and various forms. But at any point in time, what only exists is that single bright dot. Okay? And that bright dot, if you ask where does it exist, it exists everywhere in all these formations. But are you able to see it? Absolutely not. And what is it that you are seeing? The drishti is what is absolutely not there. Okay, and the distinguishing factor or the key factor that prevents this liberation is something called pratyabhignya. And an example for that is, if one walks somewhere and sees an uncut diamond, manikya. If I ask you today, on the way to this auditorium, did you see this uncut diamond that looked like this? You can't say yes or no. You would have seen it, but probably not seen it, because that knowledge did not occur in you, because there was no familiarity in that nature of what you were trying to see, okay? Or the previous knowledge that could have resulted in that recognition was not there. Okay, I'm going to skip a few things. Now, we saw in the talk day before yesterday about how new knowledge can occur, and the example that was given by Professor Georgius was, there was a beetle that was buzzing, and this is also from his book, a lot of this. And then he gave the example of a kumquat and sourness. I just replaced it with chocolate and sweetness. Now, if you recall that when the two experiences were encountered, okay, the beetle, the buzzing, the chocolate and the sweetness, it could be possible with very low probability. He spoke about him and a twin, that one could say that the beetle is sweet, or maybe not say anything at all. So though one encountered the beetle, though one encountered buzzing, one maybe did not get the knowledge that the beetle was buzzing. Okay, so what we saw, that though the two neurons were firing, the synaptic connectivity that resulted in that knowledge did not occur. Okay, and now the question is, what is the precondition for that to occur? It not only is a structural connectivity, but also that if you look at the conditional probability of encountering that, or realizing that knowledge when one of the thought constructs has occurred, that is what defines the functional connectivity of the neural network. Now, coming back to this example, this chocolate in this case is nothing but the self that you encounter in Sandhi. The sweetness is nothing but the bliss. The realization that has to occur is nothing but I am that bliss. Now, what is preventing that realization? That is what is the aim of this study. Okay, so what the text says, the literature of scientific knowledge, what it says is that there has to be some prior knowledge. Okay, for any firing to result in a synaptic connection, there has to be some prior knowledge. Now, in this case, what is that prior knowledge? That is what is the Guru Upadesha that one gains. Okay, the Guru tells you that you are that entity, that bliss. Now, that has to be again and again reflected in the mind and refined, in the sense the notion of I and the notion of bliss both have to be refined, and that creates this precondition for this knowledge to occur. Okay. So, I am just going to go to a very simple example of how this preconditioning can happen. We saw an example yesterday that when you want to understand what is yellow, you look at all these three objects and then you isolate the sense of yellow. Now, similarly, in the sense of self, on the one hand, you look at all the actions through the senses, the cogitations through the mind when you were dreaming and the senses were not active, and the third state, your experience when the senses were not active and the mind was not active. And what remained, or what was the residue, was nothing but existence and chit, sat and chit. Okay, so by this process, one isolates or one refines the sense of I. Now, similarly, if one has to refine the sense of what is bliss or what is ananda, again you go in the following stages. If one follows, this is nothing but the Panchakosha Viveka. In the first step, you say that the bliss was in an object. In the second step, you say, no, it was not in the object, it was in the act of eating that object. In the third step, you say no, it was nothing but in the mental modification that resulted through that. The fourth step, you say not even that, but the jnana that you got via that vritti, via that mental modification. And in the fifth step, you say it was not even that, it was what existed even when that jnana subsided. Okay? And the last step is you yourself is that sense of bliss. Now, I give this example always when Hanuman encountered the most blissful moment in his life, when the Hanuman Alingana Katha, in what form did he experience Rama as bliss? Not as an object, not as a kriya, mind was empty, no jnana. So in what form? What remains was his own Svarupa. That is why in the Ramayana, it was just after this moment that the Ramopadesha happened to Hanumanta, that he is that entity which is bliss. Okay, so now we come to the last part. I'll try to go a bit quickly. So how do we actually encounter this sandhi, and more importantly, how do we extend this sandhi? Okay, so the preconditioning is one part, but it's extremely important that we are able to extend this period of sandhi for that realization to occur. And for that, the key entity for us to study is the DMN, okay, which is when the DMN activity is very high, as you all know, that is what relates to mind wandering. And what is this mind wandering is all of this stuff, this whole narrative of who is me, or what we call the Chidabhasa in the beginning. Now, what does this do is, whenever there is a sense of I, me, my, it is either in the past or in the future, there is a memory retrieval that is happening. Now, the difference between the hippocampal retrieval, okay, the connection between the hippocampal and the cortical region, in deep sleep when it is severed, in sandhi, however, this connection is not severed, which means it is possible for the retrieval to happen. That's why we even come out of sandhi. But the point is, can the right retrieval happen? Can smriti parishuddhi happen such that after encountering sandhi, one remembers what is one's true svarupa? Okay? Now, a little bit more about this. So this was in the work by Gary Weber. There are two core aspects of the DMN. One is the sense of self in time, what you need to do, what you need to achieve, etc. The other is the self and the non-self, aham and idam. Okay, and both these codify what is called as the ahankara. Now, what happens when one does meditation? For example, this was a meditation by the practice prescribed by Ramana Maharshi called the Sakshi Bhava. You see that the nature place which was encoding the ahankara, encoding the ego narrative, that activation ceased and the activation focused more on stillness. Okay? Now, how do we achieve this? That is the most important thing, because where did we start from? We started this the story from one has not practiced samadhi, exactly what Arjuna tells Krishna, right? He is in the middle of war. So what does Krishna tell him? He says, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat jnanat dhyanam vishishyate jnanat karma phalatyagaha tyagat shantir anantaram. Which means, though he has not practiced samadhi, there is a simple shortcut, what is called karma phalatyaga. What is karma phalatyaga? No sense of what is in it for me. Okay? So it is not about tyaga of karma. What happens if you do tyaga of karma? This is what dominates. Mind wandering is what's going to dominate. On the other hand, karma phalatyaga would be activating this network, okay, the tasking network, but with the sense of leaving out the ego narrative, the what's in it me part of it. And what that does is, over time, it allows you in the states of sandhi to remain in that state without this getting fired again and again. Okay? So, again, why do we have to worry about this? This was another study by Professor Weber's group, that the ananda that is there, okay, the bliss that was there in sandhi is much more than anything that is sense pleasure or much more than anything got by psychedelics or anything else. Okay, and this also what he says is just a foretaste of it. What is actually in that state of liberation is orders of magnitude more. Okay, and this is what Krishna says, and in the Shankar Bhashya what it says is, from the karma phala tyaga, shantihi is that state of ultimate bliss, upashamaha, samsarasya upashamaha, the absolute end of sorrow, anantarameva syat, natu kalantaram apekshate. Meaning, karma phala tyaga gives you that ultimate state, okay, or absolute liberation from samsara immediately. On the other hand, dhyana and samadhi is going to take some time. I wish I had a little more time to go a bit more on this. Now, the other method for going to sandhi is you meditate on what is happening in deep sleep. Who was in deep sleep? Then, who was the one in deep sleep aware of that bliss and absence of cognition? And the third step is, who is the one right now aware of me meditating on that? And finally, stop meditating. Then we go to the last part, 1 minute, and I'll conclude. Okay, so how does memory affect going into sandhi as well as cognition? So this is from the Chandogya Upanishad. What it says is, if many people are sitting in one place, so now you can think of unicellular organisms as well, where due to the lack of gene expressions, the communication is not there between them. Okay, or memory expression is also probably suppressed. It says, though many people are sitting and talking to each other, bhava asiran smarantaha naivate, if the memory does not act at that point, or if it is suppressed, naivate kanchana shrunuyuhu, though they are talking, they don't hear each other. So cognition is impossible without the memory retrieval happening. Okay, and what is the cause of this memory retrieval? The Chandogya Upanishad says, asha, okay, or pravritti. And what is the cause of that? It finally ends at prana. And this was some of the literature that we were studying. One of them is by Professor Supratim Ray from IISc, who are studying the Brahma Kumari meditators. And this is another study by Professor Wojtek, which was studying the suppression in memory encoding due to disorders. And one common trait that we found through both of these was that the slope of the gamma was very low. The negative slope was very low in both cases. Of course, one reason could be the firing of the inhibitory neurons. We still need to investigate that. But this shows, at least correlatively, that what the Shastra says, that the suppression of memory leading to the states of sandhi can perhaps be experimented. And this was another thing. There is one mudra that leads to sandhi called the Amanaska mudra, where the eye, body and breath are absolutely still. And what was found was that in sleep, okay, when getting out of non-REM sleep, the movement of the eye played a very important role. Okay, and I finally conclude with this. Yesterday we saw when in Professor Roy's talk that the stages of samadhi may not be asymptotic, that there are categorical differences between them, but still in the sense of sadhana, there is a sense of a limiting process. Okay, so one way to understand both of these, so this was by a model proposed by Donald de Gracia. You're all probably familiar with this simple nonlinear system. When R is negative, you have two fixed points. He described it as one fixed point is the observer, which is the repeller, and the attractor is the observed. Consciousness flows from the observer to the observed. When R becomes 0, you have a saddle node. The two, attractor and repeller, vanish. And then finally, you have nothing after that. You have no fixed points. Okay, so though this state, this and this are categorically different, one can still think of a limiting process that leads to it. And finally, what does consciousness really look like? Okay, so this is a shloka from a text called Saundarya Lahari. what it says, it's not just silence or not just darkness. This asymptotic process, okay, when you're about to be realized, that epsilon before realization is described as tapana shashi kotit jyotidharam, meaning 1,000 suns and 1,000 moons. And what this means, very interestingly, this is not just figurative, but it was experimented by a third person that people who went into samadhi, the whole cortical area here became extremely cool. Okay, a third person could touch this cortical area and feel the coolness. So when they say 1,000 moons, it's not just figurative. And the subjective experience of the person who went into samadhi was the whole body from the Sahasrara to the Mooladhara was drenched with nectar, cooling, blissful nectar. And what 1,000 suns here means is, when there's one sun, that's enough to blind everything else in the horizon. So imagine what 1,000 suns can do. It essentially blinds every other thought construct. And finally, I'll end with this, that where does one encounter this experience? The shloka says Agnya Chakra, or here. But another, way this word Agnya Chakra was interpreted was something called Veda Samuha, the entire collection of the Vedas. And finally, what the Upanishad says is the entire Veda Samuha is nothing but the Mahamantra Japa. So this is another method to not only reach that Sandhi, but if you look at what is that Mahamantra Japa, if you just look at Rama as a Mahamantra, Ra is nothing but Prakasha, that Kutastha. That Ma is nothing but Vimarsha, or the sense of I. And Rama means the sense of I and that Prakasha are one and the same. So, to conclude, practice of going to Sandhi, very important, but going to Sandhi with the precognition. Yeah, I'm done. Okay. So, thanks. And if there's maybe one question, we can take it.
So, actually, we went a little over.
Okay,
so
sure.
We can have discussion.
Yeah, sure. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, yes. We'll felicitate our speaker. Please. Yes. So I'd like to invite our next speaker, Professor Ramakrishna Pejathaya. I'll keep his introduction short here. Dr. Pejathaya is one of the few practicing Ashtavadhanis in India, having performed over 40 avadhanams across the country. His contribution to the tradition has been very widely recognized. His work brings together scholarship and performance, exploring Indian knowledge traditions as living practices at the intersection of cognition, creativity, and pedagogy. Professor Ramakrishna Pejathaya.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Pranams to all. May I ask you a question that how many of you are aware of the art of Avadhanam or have watched the Avadhanam program? Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I took this topic because Avadhanam is an art form which actually is a beautiful example for multiple cognitive functions. I mean, multiple cognitive functions come together and they create a beautiful art form, which is something fascinating that this civilization produced. So I thought of discussing a few aspects related to this art form. In this slide, you can focus on the first and last points. So my presentation brings or focuses on understanding Avadhanam in its original and comprehensive sense, presenting it as a literary, performative and cognitive art. I am not going to discuss more deep or detailed aspects related to the cognitive functions. Researchers working in cognition, consciousness, creativity, performance studies, memory, attention and related areas may find in Avadhanam a fertile field for further exploration and interdisciplinary dialogue. There have been a few research works in this, but it could be further explored. That is the intention behind this presentation. And this is just a glimpse of how an Avadhanam stage does look like. The Avadhani is Shatavadhani Dr. R. Ganesh, who is my guru, and recently he has been awarded with Padma Bhushana by the Government of India. And this is something that many people may not be aware of, that our former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, he was a great connoisseur of Avadhanam, and he was an excellent poet also, a scholar in Sanskrit and Telugu. He used to be a Pritchaka in several Avadhanams, and this is the Avadhanam performed by Madugala Nagapani Sharma. Okay, let us discuss a few aspects related to Avadhanam, what Avadhanam is and how Avadhanam becomes an art. So on these aspects, I shall discuss a few things. Vamana says, Chittaikagryam Avadhanam in his Kavyalankara Sutra Vritti. So Aikagriya means one-pointedness, which is Avadhana is one-pointedness of the mind. And he further continues in his Vritti that Chittasya Aikagryam Bahyartha Nivrittihi Tad Avadhanam Avahitam hi Chittam Arthan Pashyati. So Aikagryam is Bahyartha Nivritti. Mental concentration means turning away of the mind from external distractions for only a mind that is attentive or avahita perceives its objects. So that's how he defines. So Avadhana is required to anyone. I mean, it is not restricted only to these aspects, but everyone requires Avadhanam, Avahitamana. When it becomes an art, or how Avadhanam has been practiced in the form of an art, there are multiple types of Avadhanam. I have given only an indicative list. It actually goes beyond. So there are different types of Avadhanam: Sahitya Avadhanam, Gita Avadhanam, Ganita Avadhanam, Sanketa Avadhanam. It goes further like Sangeeta Avadhanam, Nritya Avadhanam and all. Okay, Gita Avadhanam is retention, retrieval and contextual engagement with the verses and teachings of Bhagavad Gita. You take a text and ask question from any part of that particular text. That is called as Gita Avadhana, and few people perform Amarakosha Avadhana, such things also. Sangeeta Avadhana is something unique, that usually we sing one song with one particular tala, but Avadhana Pallavi, Sangeeta Avadhanam is called as Avadhana Pallavi, where the singer, in the right hand they play one tala, left hand another tala, two legs other couple of talas, and with head another. So simultaneously, one song is being sung with 5 different talas. That is called as Avadhana Pallavi, which is something interesting. And some Sanketa Avadhanams are there. For example, Ghanta Avadhana or Netra Avadhana, where some codes, I mean, Netra Avadhana I have given here, observing and interpreting codes, information conveyed through eye movements. So every eye movement is associated with different letters and all. So one particular sentence is expressed through different eye movements. That is called as Netra Avadhana. So two people will be there. So one actually he presents, I mean, by the audience some sentence will be given, and this performer actually presents different eye movements. Based on that, other one actually interprets and he gives the sentence. So that is Netra Avadhanam. Ghanta Avadhanam is something like that also. So what Sahitya Avadhanam is, so usually if you go to the southern parts of India, like Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka, or even from those parts people perform Sanskrit Avadhanam also, where this Sahitya Avadhanam, it is extempore literary composition and response under multiple simultaneous constraints. So which is something interesting to note here, and whatever I will be presenting further in this presentation, connected with the Sahitya Avadhanam only. because that is the area of my interest. So, and why Sahitya Avadhanam is, what to say, I mentioned here that every Avadhanam is worthy of appreciation. And the nature of these Avadhanams actually differ. And why some, all the other Avadhanams, what I mentioned, and you must have seen Avadhanam in Jaina tradition, that Jaina Munis, they are answering 1000 questions, Sahasra Avadhanam and all. So all these Avadhanams, apart from Sahitya Avadhanam, they are operating based on retention, recall or recognition. I mean, Netravadhana or Ghantavadhana, these are actually recognizing some codes and all. Whereas Sahitya Avadhanam simultaneously combines creative production and retention. So, which makes Sahitya Avadhanam something different, and that part I will elaborate later. How is Sahitya Avadhanam performed? Since many of you are not aware of this art form, I had shown an image also of an Avadhanam stage. So multiple Prichakas pose simultaneous literary challenges. So if it is Ashtavadhana, then 8. If it is Shatavadhana, then 100 literary challenges will be posed to the Avadhani. And each challenge involves a specific constraint. So Samasya Purti, Nishiddhakshari, Dattapada. So these are different poetic challenges. That also will be given, I will be giving some examples in subsequent slides. The Avadhani composes extempore, and what happens, it is fully spontaneous. There is no syllabi, there is no theme. So the questions, the poetic challenges may arise from any part, any area. So then and there only, without the aid of any kind of literature or any pen and paper and all, Avadhani must compose some responsive poems in order to get through with the performance. So Avadhani composes extempore verses, and what happens, it is not that he completes one verse and goes further. So you must have you can recollect this one. So towards the right side of Avadhani, you can see 4 people sitting there. So the first one, he is the Prichaka for Nishiddhakshari. Second one is the Prichaka for Samasya Purti. In that way it goes. So one verse actually typically contains 4 padas, 4 quarters. So he completes 1 quarter of Nishiddhakshari and then it goes to the first quarter of Samasya Purti. Then he goes to the first quarter of Dattapada. In between, you can see towards his left side, usually 2 questioners. One will be Apracha Prasangi and the other one will be Ghanta Ganana or Sankhya Bandha. They will be interrupting Avadhani with the various other questions. So Aprastuta Prasanga, the name itself suggests that the topic, unrelated topics. Aprastuta means which is not appropriate to that particular, it is not relevant. So he may be asking any kind of question. So in that way it goes on. So he, despite responding to those questions, he shouldn't get deviated. He must continue composing the verses. So in that way it goes on. At the conclusion, all compositions are recited in sequence, revealing a performance that combines creative production, retention, responsiveness, and aesthetic expression. So let us see how, what makes something an art. When we call something, Avadhanam is Chitta Ekagriya, one pointedness of the mind. And simultaneously we are saying that Avadhanam is an art. So what makes an art? So Kamlati or Kalyate Anaya Itiva Kala. A kala is that which enriches, delights and elevates. And if you ask Indian aesthetics, then it says that the ultimate purpose of a kala is Rasananda and Purushartha Pratipatti. Since restricted with the time, I am not going to elaborate these aspects, but this is what Indian aesthetics actually argues, that Rasananda and Purushartha Pratipatti are the primary goals of any art form. But every art form, if it should succeed in taking us towards that Rasananda or Purushartha Pratipatti, it should evoke some wonder. So that's what Kavikantabharana of Kshemendra says. Yekena kena chidanargha maniprabhena kavyam chamatkriti padena vinasuvarnam. It says that chamatkara is what keeps the audience engaged with, and that will lead the audience towards Rasananda. And what chamatkara is, Vishwanatha in his Sahitya Darpana says, chamatkara chitta vistara rupaha vismaya paryayaha. Chitta vistara, it is an expansion of the mind. That's how he defines chamatkara. And now we can ask the question that what all those things that cause wonder. So I have listed some causes that can lead us towards wonder. One is novelty. We always say that Kavi should be Srijanashila or Sarjanashila, that creativity should be there. It should be with the poet, or it should be, it can be seen in a researcher also. So an original insight, scientific insight also contains creativity. At the same time, a new poetic work also contains, it also emerges from creativity. And rapidity or spontaneity. If sudden, immediately a spontaneous response also evokes some kind of chamatkara. And even in like Bharatanatyam or Sangeeta performance, though some predetermined things will be there, but in between the performance, when they make some kind of improvisation, that evokes more wonder, and that makes people keep people more engaged with. And Sanirbandhatva, mastery under constraints. Walking is something that everyone performs. But rope walk, you are doing an action with some kind of constraint. So whenever we perform something with several constraints, cooking with limited ingredients, so these things are also could be considered as art. So when you perform something under constraint, that is something. And accomplishment without external aid, breadth and diversity of subject matter, these things actually evoke that wonder. And what uniqueness that Avadhanam performance brings in is, it is the place that all these elements actually come together to create that wonder. In other art form, I'm not saying that it is not a generalization, but we usually see that in Avadhanam, right from the beginning till the end, it is completely spontaneous and completely, improvisation, that no predetermined things will be there. So that is, therefore I would like to say that these are the things that individually create wonder, but Avadhanam brings all these things together. So these things I can skip. Ashutva, I just, how individual elements can evoke wonder. This Ashutva, you can see the second point. It was Shankara Mishra, when he was a great scholar from Mithila of 15th century. So his father was Bhavanatha Mishra, and when King Shivasimha came past to him, he was just 5 years old, and the king asked that child that we always when children come we say no, that ek Gita ka ek shlok sunao, something like that, and he asked the child Shankara Mishra that just recite one poem. Then Shankara Mishra asks him, should I recite older poem or my own composition? Then this Shivasimha finds it something interesting, that how a 5 years old child can say this. Then immediately that 5 years old Shankara Mishra responds that Baloham Jagadananda Name Bala Saraswati Apurne Panchame Varshe Varnayami Jagatrayam. With lesser than 3 years, I might be in my 5th year, but I can describe the 3 worlds. So that's how he responds. So witty, immediate responses also create wonder. And this Vishaya Vyapti and Vaividhya, particularly if you observe the Avadhanams of Shatavadhari Dr. R. Ganesh, the kind of breadth and width or diversity in the discussions he brings in something really interesting, and it creates wonder. Yes, sir. 2 minutes. Yeah. And these are the challenges that Avadhanam performance actually brings in. That Nishiddhakshari, composing verses while avoiding specific letters or syllables. Samasya Purti. Let me give you a couple of direct examples rather than explaining it. So here is the verse. The Samasya was given, Padarahitah Padapastu Dhavanti. I have highlighted. So legless trees run around. Now this is something that mismatch, right? So trees cannot run around. And how the response was given, Macbeth namnikhyate manohare rupake tu chararmanke barnankanana samstha padarahitah padapastu dhavanti. The Avadhani brought the Macbeth play of William Shakespeare, and he says that in the last act, the trees actually run. So he brought, and immediately you have to recollect that part. You must have studied whether someone who performs Sanskrit Avadhana, he whether would have studied William Shakespeare or not, that is a different thing. And immediately then and there he must recollect that thing, and he must produce the verse. So that's something interesting. And this question I had posed to Avadhani Mahesh Bhatt. So this is Dattapadi. There will be a topic and meter also prescribed. And the questioner actually gives 4 words. The words can be from any language or irrelated words. So I had given the words Creta, Baleno, Tiago, Desire. So these are 4 modern day Rathas. And the topic given is Manoratha, the desires of human beings. So now how do you fit these words in Sanskrit? So for example, Creta, Vakretanam, Saruvada, Vakre Atanam, Vakretanam. So Creta can be incorporated. And Baleno, now how do you incorporate? Hatabale no vardhanam jayate. Hatabale no vardhanam. Baleno, you can incorporate. Tiago. So Asha Dhurjati Manahari Sukrutod Ghot Pati Yagopama. Utpati Yagopama. So you brought in Tiago. Okay. So in this way, it is very, you must be having sound vocabulary and the grammatical rules also, so that you can, for example, Gadha, Besharam, these words, if someone gives you, that Besharam, Jagadambesha, Ramesha. So Jagadambesha and Ramesha, you merge these two. Jagadambesha, Ramesha, Besharam word can be incorporated. So in this way, some brain gym that one must undergo. And this is the Chitra Kavya. So there are different patterns. So here, the visualization of because this pattern will not be shown to you. So in Avadhanam performance, the questioner only says that this must be, this is the topic and you must perform in this meter. This is the bandha, Pushpagucha bandha, Mala bandha and all. So is there the pointer in this? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, where should I show? Yeah, here. So you can see here, Dinavanayanayako. So that that is the middle point of that pushpa and flower, and the same syllable should repeat. Okay, so you can see here the verse, Dinavanayanayako vibhati bhanubhaswaraha, which is Panchachamara meter. And so Dinavanayanayako Vibhati Bhanu Bhaswaraha. So you can see that Bha is getting repeated. Okay. So in that way only you must compose, and you can see some more complex this one. This is called as Chitra Bandha, Krishna Sarpa Bandha. So the verse begins here. So Shiva Saruva Nirasta Khalastava Nodbhava Bhavana Bhavabhavana Bharatalasarasa. So what happens, you can see here Shiva, so this bandha is predetermined and you are not seeing that bandha, so everything you must visualize, and the second syllable should be the penultimate syllable also. You can see here Va is present and Va is, so if you place that, whatever syllable you placed as a second syllable should be the penultimate syllable in your verse. Then only that bandha will be incorporated. The third syllable should be placed in the third from the last. in the second pada, then only that bandha can be incorporated. So everything you must keep it in your mind, and you have to compose the verse, which is very difficult but interesting. And so these are the cognitive functions that one can notice in an avadhanam performance: attention management, retention and recall, creative lateral thinking, and so on. These are the earliest records of avadhanam that we can see from the 10th century. The features of avadhanam like samasya purti and all can be found in Vatsyayana's Kama Sutra and all, but these are the earliest references. Mallideva also, and in Shringara Ratnakara, that Kavi Kama, he says Esakam Betta Mati Prakasha and all. And female practitioners of avadhanam also we can see, Madhuravani and Ramabhadraamba from 17th century. And Madhuravani, she presents herself that Veena Vadyakala Vinoda Samaye Dhritva Samasya Shatam. While playing Veena, I address 100 poetic challenges. And she, in another verse, she says that Tattadrik Ghatikardha Nirmita Shata Shloki Panigramani. Within half Ghatika, 12 minutes of time, I can compose 100 verses. So such female scholars also were present in India. Particularly this is Nayakas of Tanjavur. So avadhanam, why avadhanam, once again, if I can say. So in avadhanam is a rare space where we are witnessing and enjoying the birth of an art, creation of an art. In many other places, what we see, an art form is already created and later we are actually appreciating, but creation of the art being, presented and we are appreciating, that is something unique in this. So with this, let me conclude. I am sorry for taking, Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's absolutely fascinating. Next time we should have a 2-hour workshop on this where you could demonstrate.
Definitely.
So we'll felicitate our speaker, Professor Vijitaya. And in the meantime, I'd like to request our next speaker, the last in this session, Professor Theodore, to come up, please.
Take off my shoes.
Okay, Professor Itamar Theodore is visiting us from Israel. His talk is going to be on the Bhagavad Gita, Bridging Mind, Consciousness and Philosophy. Professor Theodore is an author and editor of numerous books, journal articles and book chapters on Indian philosophy, comparative theology and religion. He has a very popular book called Exploring the Bhagavad Gita, Philosophy, Structure and Meaning, which has received Choice Outstanding Academic Title Award. So with that, let's welcome Professor Theodore.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you for staying here. It's late. I'm opening my timer as to not to take too much time. That's why I'm playing with the phone. I'd like to thank the organizers for having invited me here all the way from Israel. I'd like to thank my friends from the BRC, Bhaktivedanta Research Center, who have facilitated my coming. Originally, I prepared a 6,000 words paper for this conference. I thought I'm going to read and read and read. Having come to this conference, I realized that's not the way to go. So in the conference, I prepared a new presentation, very short, and just trying to explain what I'm trying to do. That's all in 15 minutes, and that's it. So let's see if it works. How do you make this work? Or here? I don't know. I'm not sure how it's supposed to work. So, you can hear me, I can walk a little. So, I'd like to start with establishing the fact, which you all know, that there is an academic discipline of studying the Bhagavad Gita for the last about 200 years, a Western academic discipline of studying the Bhagavad Gita. And here are some quotes about some famous names, Garbs, and then you have Deussen, Jacobi, Schrader, Oldenburg, Winternitz, Egerton, Hill, and Lamotte, Carpenter, Otto, Paul Deussen. I won't go to the whole thing, but there is a long and very serious tradition of studying the Bhagavad Gita. We have to also know that the President of India, Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, was also one of these scholars. He was an Oxford scholar. He was the Spalding Professor of Eastern Religions in Oxford. And actually, when Rabindranath Tagore got the Nobel Prize, it was the another one. No, it was another prize, but it was Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan who came to give him that. Anyhow, so that's it. And now I want to speak about the way Western scholarship views the Bhagavad Gita. And what I'm trying to say, that the present view, in the logical view of the Bhagavad Gita, is that it is not philosophy. It is not philosophy. Now, there's a gap between the Indian view and the Western view. In the Indian view, the Bhagavad Gita is philosophy, karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, ashtanga yoga, and so forth. But from the Western, in the logical tradition, the Bhagavad Gita is not philosophy. So what is the Bhagavad Gita according to the Western Indological tradition? According to the tradition, the Bhagavad Gita is eclectic, means it brings together various ideas from various philosophical traditions, both Astika and Nastika. It has Vedanta and Mimamsa and Sankhya and Yoga, a little Nyaya, a little Vaisheshika, Buddhism, Jainism, all together in an eclectic way, all together, but without a structure. And that's what I'm saying. So these ideas are generally considered not to be consistent with each other. And therefore the Gita is considered to be in the category of wisdom or religion and not philosophy. Even if you go to the great history of Indian philosophy by Dasgupta, written about 100 years ago, published in Cambridge University Press, I think it was 1922. It doesn't see the consistency in the Gita. So this is a common view about the Gita. And now I'll show you even more. About 6 years ago, there was a very important and serious publication called The Routledge History of Indian Philosophy. It was published and there was a board of editors, very good scholars, and the main editor is Professor Purushottama Bilimoria, and it's a great volume. You have there 58 essays composed by leading scholars and represents excellent scholarship. I really think that. However, despite covering all the major areas of Indian philosophy, there's no chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. See, there's a new book, extensive book, 58 chapters, everything, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, Buddhism, Jainism, everything is there. No chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. And why? Because the Bhagavad Gita is not considered philosophy. As simple as that. And it's a good book. I recommend it. So, how could the Bhagavad Gita be considered philosophy? What will make, in the logical academic tradition, to accept the Bhagavad Gita as philosophy? So, for it to be a philosophy, it needs an a priori structure, a theoretical structure, a priori, something which is theoretical. And here is a famous scholar of Indian philosophy, Jonathan Ganeri, and he characterizes philosophy. And he says, philosophy is circumscribed by adherence to a certain methodology and body of problems. Broadly, it is the a priori analysis of the interconnections and distinction between groups of concepts to do with the nature of value, thought, existence, and meaning. The main thing is a priori structure. This is what we're looking for in order for a text to be considered philosophy. So the implications of accepting the Bhagavad Gita's philosophy, once the Bhagavad Gita's a priori structure is articulated, a bridge could be constructed between the Indian system of Indian knowledge systems, which is what we are doing here, and Western Indological discourse. I think it's, I very much hope that you see the point that once we can unite these two worlds of knowledge, of wisdom, that they speak in the same language, it will be an extraordinary. The implication is that this will promote the Bhagavad Gita as a philosophy on a global level. Everyone will be able to talk in the same terms. So now I'm speaking about my own work, and I want to apologize for any tinge of self-promotion. It's not my talk, but I want to explain what I'm doing. I have been working in the Bhagavad Gita for about 30 years now. My goal was and is to articulate the Bhagavad Gita's a priori structure as to connect Gita scholarship East and West. That's what I'm trying to do. In doing so, I've studied the Bhagavad Gita in both traditional way, in ISKCON, and an academic way, in Oxford. As such, I published 3 books on a topic by respectable academic publishers. This is the first book, Exploring the Bhagavad Gita, Philosophy, Structure and Meaning, published that in Ashgate 2010. And that won a very prestigious award. And if you can see that, it's a little small, but Professor Klostermaier says that since Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, no one has written as a penetrating commentary or study on the Gita as Theodore has done. It's here on that book. This book received, this is the review in the Journal of Hindu Studies by Professor Carl Olson. And he says it's very difficult to imagine that someone will be able to contribute something new, but Theodore does accomplish it. Then from Theodore's point of view, this is a coherent theological, philosophical treatise that is firmly unified as a single text because of its conceptual structure. And then he says Theodore's study, translation, and commentary of the Bhagavad Gita is destined to assume an important place in scholarship devoted to the epic text. This necessarily means that future scholars will have to consider Theodore's study or be considered deficient in their scholarship. That's what he writes, Journal of Hindu Studies, Oxford University Press. Oh, thank you. Thank you. This book was published Indian edition by Routledge. It's in English, and was also published Hindi edition with the BRC. So I'm here in the Indian book market. Then I published another book. This was actually ordered by Routledge India. They asked me to publish another book, the Bhagavad Gita Critical Edition, Introduction. But then I came to my last book for which I came here, and that's The Philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, Cambridge University Press. This was just published about half a year ago. And for me, it's maybe one of the peaks of my academic work, because it was difficult to convince Cambridge, which is one of the best publishers, academic publishers in the world, that I can even say the word, the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. Some said no, say the theology, this and that, but then Cambridge said no, that's what you're saying, so let's call the book The Philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. And in this book, I actually decipher the Bhagavad Gita into all kinds of, I have many ideas there which I will not repeat here, but that's really accepted by a very leading academic and respectable publisher. And the point is that here, finally, at least here, it's accepted that the Bhagavad Gita is actually a philosophy. So that's, yeah, this is Arvind Sharma. He's a very authoritative professor, maybe one of the biggest scholars in academia of the Bhagavad Gita. Itamar Theodore's new book outlines the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita on its own terms, without aligning it with any particular school of Hindu thought. It constitutes a serious attempt to outline its teachings through some key terms but without anchoring them in pre-existing schools of thought or giving them a confessional term. Recommend a significant monograph warmly. Means I'm not trying to associate with Advaita Vedanta or Vishishta Advaita or Dvaita, but it's not confessional. And actually, Professor Purushottam Pilimoria, he says that I'm a commentator in my own right. He says you're like a Ramanuja, Madhva, the medieval commentators, you have your own commentarial path. So it's a great compliment, and I thank him very much for his very kind words. So that's it. And this is the end. That's all I want to say. I have my paper. This is the abstract of my paper, which I originally intended. I will not even read the whole thing, but what I'll say is that I have described my academic journey aiming at articulating the structure of the Bhagavad Gita with the goal of building a bridge between Indian and Western Gita scholarship. I call the structure a three-story house. I will not explain it here. I prepared a 20-page paper for this conference, and anyone interested is invited to contact me directly, and I will send a full paper. So here you have my phone number, you have my email, and if you want to get in touch, I will send you the full paper, 20 pages, and how I deal with the structure of the Bhagavad Gita, and all this in 12 minutes and 35 seconds. Thank you. Look at this.
That's excellent. That you were under time. I know, here's 15
You
minutes.
can have questions if Mr. Chairman allows.
Yeah.
I'm
sure.
still 30 minutes still.
One or two questions, yes.
See, you said that Gita is not philosophy, not you, others. But this is not a new position. There was, because you are a philosopher, I'm sure you will be knowing, there was this philosopher Antony Flew. He said that there is no philosophy east of Suez.
No philosophy?
East of Suez. There is no philosophy east of Suez.
Okay.
So he was a...
Okay.
And essentially because all philosophy is anchored in logic and not so much in empirical stuff. So that was his main argument. So I just wanted to share this, and this is something not new. And maybe, one last small, maybe we should start differentiating between philosophy and darshan.
Thank you so much, Professor. So I addressed this point. The point is about all philosophy being anchored in logic. I addressed this point in this paper and also in my book. And I addressed that in my chapter about the nature of Upanishadic knowledge. And I bring the critique that some scholars have that Upanishads are not philosophy because they don't have arguments and counter-arguments underlined by logic. And I try to bring first the Bhagavad Gita's epistemology. I go to the 18th chapter and I quote verse 20 and 21, which differentiate between two types of knowledge, sattvic and rajasic. And I say that the Anumana system, building upon arguments from the Gita's point of view, is rajasic. And when you look for the sattvic type of knowledge, then you see unifying knowledge. So I start with that discussion to show that the Gita has its own epistemology. It's aware of that. It categorizes logic and arguments, but as rajasic as opposed to sattvic. And then I go further to develop this idea of epistemology, and I say that to understand Upanishadic nature, you have to see the direction, which is elevation of consciousness. And this is part of my structure of the Bhagavad Gita, which I would say very briefly, is underlined by a karma yoga ladder. We have the yoga ladder, yama, niyama, and so forth. But similarly, that's my argument, and it's a traditional source. It's not something I invented. I picked it up from traditional, actually Vaishnava sources. Actually from a thinker called Vishwanath Chakravarti, 18th century. He has these ideas of various levels of Dharma, actually. And that this Upanishadic knowledge has its aim in elevation, according to the ladder. That's in the book, and if you like the paper, I'll be very happy to send it. I elaborated there, but yeah. But thank you for that. It was a good point.
Okay, one more, and then you have. Maybe let's give her a chance. Okay.
Oh, thank you. First of all, just a fantastic talk and presentation. I was absolutely delighted by it. I'd like to ask, just being simple of the topic in this way, what would be the strongest philosophical point that you would associate with the Bhagavad Gita? To give us just one example that you present.
Well, thank you. What I'm saying that the Bhagavad Gita has an a priori structure, which you can describe without anchoring it to the text itself. It's theoretical. And once you understand the structure, it has an immense potential of unifying many philosophies. It has a unique structure. And it has a potential of unifying many cultures and philosophies and religions. I see it in a global way. I think that the Bhagavad Gita has a global potential once you realize the structure. Let's see, that will happen. But that's the way I see that, yeah. Thank you so much for this question.
Thank you. With that, let's thank Professor Ithamar Theodore with a round of applause. So we'll felicitate him in a second, but before that, we are behind schedule. But our parallel sessions for the afternoon, they're supposed to start at 2:30 and they will still start at 2:30. For those who have kindly stayed back here, I am very thankful to all of you. What I suggest is that there should be no queue, no rush. You could take your lunch plate and make it like a partial working lunch / attendance in seminars. So you could take your plates there, have listen and also have your lunch, and after that return the plates back to the catering area, if that's okay. So you could do that. Thank you very much. We'll meet again here at 4:30 for the closing ceremony. Okay, today is the last day of the conference. I'm already feeling very sad. Let's felicitate. Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
thank you for being patient. We were late, but
And that you're over here, that's good.
Yeah, please. And this is a very famous Krishna, handmade Krishna from wood from South India.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Fun.
We take, yeah. And let me hold this back for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Till when are you here? You speaking tomorrow?
Leaving tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Sure. I'll talk to you some more after the closing ceremony. I have to chair a session, so I have to run.
Whatever you like.
But I will. Thank you.